hearing on Senate Bill 272. Before we start, will you all please rise and have the pledge to allegiance to the flag? Senator Prentice.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have the prime sponsor for Senate Bill 272, Senator Carson. Please.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of Senate Education. I hope you all had a wonderful vacation week last week, and we're back to work starting today, and everyone's all rested and ready to go. Madam Chair, this morning I have for your consideration Senate Bill 272, which seeks to establish a Parent's Bill of Rights in Education. This bill, again, establishes a parent's Bill of Rights, what constitutes, a violation of such rights, and a mechanism to notify parents of their rights. Madam Chair, we've seen something similar to this bill that we actually did pass last year. Unfortunately, it failed in the House after the Committee of Conference. And Madam Chair, I listened very, very carefully to all sides when it came time to look at this issue again. Last time it was in Senate Judiciary. This time it's geared just towards education. And I did have meetings with a number of parties that expressed interest in this bill and talked through a lot of the problems and tried to come up with a solution. And the bill that you have in front of you is that solution. I think there's a couple of points, quite frankly, that I'd like to make. And that's parents truly love their children. Without doubt, there are well-intentioned people working at all levels of government, but schools simply cannot provide the type of love and care and support that a parent has for their children. Parents know their children better than state actors. No school employee has spent hours every day over the course of years with a child. Rather, various school officials come to know a child in comparatively brief interactions over a far shorter period of time. And they know even less about the families they are judging, and make no mistake, judging is what is happening here. When they decide what a child's concern about parental acceptance or rejection is well placed. Most of us have children. Some of us are lucky enough to have grandchildren. And we have raised our children the best that we can. We certainly do not drop them off at the schoolhouse door for kindergarten and then pick them up at high school graduation. Many parents, in fact, most parents across the state, are actively involved and want to be actively involved in their children's education. And that, Madam Chair, is my observance, and something that was brought to my attention during the COVID epidemic, when our public schools shut down and students began remote learning. Parents were paying attention to what their children were learning in school, and they had questions. Many of them had a lot of questions. So they did what they were supposed to do. They went to their local school boards, where they were turned down. Many of them were not even allowed to address the school board with their concerns. I know that happened in my home community. I attended a couple of the meetings, and quite frankly, Madam Chair, I was really appalled at the behavior that I saw happening. So I filed a piece of legislation that we all worked hard on, that passed and is now law, that says that a school board must allow 30 minutes for parents to speak at every meeting. And from what I understand and what I'm hearing, it's working well. Some districts already did this, but others did not. And that's what you want to see. You want to see the communication between a parent and the schools. But in some instances, that communication is not happening, and that's what this bill seeks to address. Schools and children are not good predictors on how their parents will react. A school that accepts a child's concern about parental rejection is placing its judgment in the hands of someone who is too young to purchase alcohol, too young to get a tattoo, too young to vote, too young to consent to most medical treatment, and potentially, and also they have to get a state permit in order to drive, to learn to drive. Our society believes that age is related to judgment. Authorizing children to censor and restrict parental knowledge is completely inconsistent with this. Madam Chair, what I'd like to do is just walk you through the bill. And I think what the one issue that everyone is here about really begins on page 4, beginning with, I would say, line S. And that's on line 9, section S. And this is about a parent's right to be informed about what is happening in school. And where this section differs from the bill we had last year. The bill that we had last year, Madam Chair, said if a child talks to a teacher and talks about their sexuality, or they feel that they are transgendered, that the school or the teacher had to automatically report that conversation to the parents. What's different in this section, in this bill, it affirms the parent's right to know. But what it does say is if the parent asks the question of the school district, that they must answer that question honestly. They cannot lie to a parent. We know that our schools, their primary job is to educate children. And what lesson are you teaching a child when you say that it's okay to lie to your parents? As a parent, I find that appalling because I know I taught my children from the earliest when they could understand how important it was to be honest. That old saying, honesty is the best policy. So what you see beginning on line 9 on page 4 through, I would argue, line 24, that addresses in statute exactly what I just said. The right to inquire of the school or school personnel and to be truthfully and completely informed if their child is being identified by any other than the name under which the child is enrolled in the school, or any nickname that a reasonable person would understand to be commonly derived from such name, including under circumstances which a reasonable person would understand to be for the purpose of facilitating a change of gender or gender transition. And I think this is the section that many people are here to argue about. And what I tried to do with this legislation was to create a balance, to recognize that the parents have rights in this situation as well, because we all know that parents have the legal obligation to provide support, to provide whatever the child needs. And how can a parent do that if they don't know what's going on with their children in school? And I think that's really very important. Some people would argue that this is singling out children that are transgendered. And I would argue perhaps it is. And that's because this issue has come to the forefront here in New Hampshire with a case that was filed against the Manchester School District, where a parent who is a teacher was found out that the school was facilitating this type of transition without her knowledge. And she was very angry and she sued. And I believe, and I hope I'm not misquoting, the school response was, well, we don't have to tell you. And that's wrong. The parents should know what's going on with their children in school. I would also like to point out on page 5 that there is a section here that addresses the concerns. One of the things that we had talked about in earlier iterations of this bill was that some children were afraid that they were going to be subject to abuse if their parents found out. So beginning on line 15 on page 5, this is the procedure for determination of the existence of a compelling state interest warranting infringement upon those parental rights. If there is a strong belief that a child is going to be placed in some sort of danger, physical danger, that there is a procedure in which a school can infringe upon parental rights. And I think that's a good balance. So at this point, Madam Chair, I'm going to conclude my testimony and try to answer any questions that you might have.
Senator, thank you for being here. I received a lot of emails on this bill. I'm sure the committee has also received a lot. I'm sure you have received a lot. And I just want to kind of elaborate on what you were talking about. And the overriding theme of these emails was that this would put a certain group of children in harm's way. And that's what a lot of the constituency is worried about, that this would harm transgender children and the LGBTQ plus community.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, that's why, in my belief, we have that particular section. Because I think I know that you're a parent, but your children are very small. But as they get older, they're going to be concerned about perhaps coming to parents about a sensitive issue. And here, if this is truly a founded belief, where you could argue that there have been past episodes of abuse by a parent, because we all know teachers are mandatory reporters, school officials. So if there's a record, and I'm just using this as an example, that a child has been subjected to physical abuse, or they've been thrown out of their home, or something else has happened, that if they believe that to be something that's going to happen, there is no procedure in which they can infringe upon their rights. They have to have written statements and so on and so forth, because as you can imagine, if a parent finds out, and believe me, parents are going to find out. I like to use the example that if you have someone coming to school, the parent puts them on the school bus as John, and the kids at school have to start calling them Jane. Children talk. They're going to talk. And eventually the parents will find out. And they're going to go to the school and say, what in the world is going on here? That is the opportunity for the school to be honest. Perhaps the school can adopt policies about counseling or whatever. That is going to be up to how the school handles it. But they must be honest. You can't just have a child say, my parents are going to kill me, or my parents are not going to understand. I hate to tell you, but most parents have some sort of an indication something's going on. And they just want the truth, because they have a lifelong interest in that child, in the well-being of their child. And so give them the opportunity to be parents rather than shutting them out. And I hope I have answered your question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle, president of NEA New Hampshire, and I am here representing more than 17,000 educators across the state. I think my testimony is going to be a little different than most, and I know there's people behind me that are going to address concerns and issues that I'm probably not going to, so I just want to put that out there first. We do have several concerns with this piece of legislation, and we're here in opposition to it. Some of the concerns we have include the penalties that are in it, its overbroad language that are tied to those penalties, as well as numerous areas that we feel are confusing and in some cases duplicative to laws or rules that are already in place. We have a strong objection to the violation section that indicates any parent claiming violations of any provision of this chapter may bring an action for declaratory and/or injunctive relief and monetary damages against the school or school personnel. Enabling litigation against individual employees does not foster one of the most important relationships in education that we were just talking about. That's the relationship between parents and teachers. This sort of language is more likely to drive a wedge between that relationship rather than foster what we know to be true today, that involved parents and teachers working together serves the best interest of the child. This also seems likely to lead to dramatically increased costs for schools and on educators, and just ensure costs like insurance liabilities will need to increase when so much of the language in this bill is subjective and left up to the beholder. Teachers want to, and they do work with engaged parents to deliver a high-quality education. This litigation threat really, we think, is going to allow a small minority of parents to intimidate educators. Just prior to the violation section of the bill that outlines briefly what the chapter would not do, there's nothing that prohibits the frivolous use of this litigation threat if it's being used to harass a teacher because of a disagreement over a piece of curriculum or that teacher's approach. The proposed penalties are particularly problematic, given that some of the provisions are still very broad. We appreciate the sponsor's attempt to ground numerous provisions into statutory rights that already exist for parents. But there's still broad language, such as in proposed 189B3I. All parental rights are reserved, including but not limited to. This leaves open there are other rights or violations that could happen, which would then cause the person who violated those rights to be sued, even though they don't know what those unstated rights are. Therefore, we feel it makes the bill unconstitutionally vague. There's also several parts of this bill that leave many questions, contradict, or duplicate already existing education laws or rules. In 169.14, there are rights that seem very broad and unclear, including the right to direct the education and care of his or her minor child. How does that interact with the rights of other parents to do the same? And what happens if the parents of the children in the same classroom disagree about the direction the classroom instruction should take? Does this provide for that granular level of direction? How does this interact with core curriculum standards that are already set in statute? There's already standards and systems set out in rules for parents to opt out of certain instruction, but a class cannot be changed for every single child in the class. In addition, the same section also establishes the right to direct the upbringing and moral or religious training of his or her minor child. But again, like the previous language concerns, what is included in that moral training? We really feel the Department of Education should be explaining to this committee how they interpret this sort of language because of the concerns. We know that members of the State Board of Education and the Commissioner of Education have had all sorts of interpretations of what this type of language could potentially mean. And we feel the department should be able to explain to you how they see this law being implemented. A few other portions of the bill that are undefined, such as what is the definition of a medical procedure in proposed 189B3S. I think school nurses deserve to know with clarity what that means so they can follow this law and not run afoul inadvertently and then be sued. On page line 3, line 6, why are we using federal code here rather than what already exists in New Hampshire, which is RSA 91A? So much of this bill granularly incorporates information and procedures that professional educators operate under now, and we do not see a reason why this needs to be put into law. Personally, I do not know of any teacher that if a parent asks for course curriculum or to discuss something being taught in their classroom would not readily do it. While parents shouldn't need it, what is this bill providing for beyond access to public records not already included in our 91A laws? As we've discussed in the committee before, we have a shortage of educators in our classroom. That's no secret. Passing a law like this with the penalties and the concerns outlined earlier, I think only serves to dissuade people from entering the profession. It really feels like they're under attack and not being supported. Parents and educators have been working well together for a long time in New Hampshire. We have a really good system in place. We should be passing legislation that supports the relationship, not fractures it with broadly subjective language coupled with threat of litigation. And we respectfully request this committee find Senate Bill 272 an expedient to legislate. And I do have paper copies to hand in.
And on the other hand, if you really have something to say, make sure that it does not repeat everything else that has been said. So we appreciate it. And at this point, I think I have to limit the speaking time to 3 minutes, and I will keep track of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Rusanne Chester next, and after that, the what?
Questions?
Okay. Need this one. Rusanne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee
3
members.
minutes. 3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Roxanne Chester. I'm from Bedford, New Hampshire. Just a couple of things. I went to a school board meeting last night here in our city, in City of Concord, and heard a lot about what's going on in one of the Concord classrooms, or teachers. I want to start by saying that I am devastated that an art teacher here in Concord is in the fight for his life and his profession, and he's being used as a pawn by both sides, and that's not okay. So all the people that are against this bill are using teachers who are trying to represent their authentic self. They're using them as pawns, and that's not okay. I heard the National Education Association mention that there's no reason why this is needed because of the 91A laws. The bottom line is it's not working. The 91A laws are not working and have not worked for a long time. I had a child in the Concord school system that I removed because they were suicidal. I wouldn't have known that they were suicidal if I hadn't found a note. I had been going to the school system for 3 months prior to that suicide note being found, saying, help me help my child. And they were putting it all back on me, saying, it's your family environment. I had my child in counseling. I had so much going on. Come to find out, this teacher was physically abusing students in that classroom. And this teacher had been moved 7 times in 5 years. She also lost 12 students that year in that classroom. So most educators are wonderful people. This man that's in the fight for his profession right now may be an absolutely fantastic person. He may love his job. And because of the way he presents, he is now in a fight to keep that job and spend time with the kids he loves. This would not even be an issue if parents' rights had been honored all along. But we have gotten further and further away from allowing parents to have the say in their child's education, and that's a reality. I've worked for DCYF for 17 years.
30 seconds left.
I did a lot of investigation with Child Protective Services and the police department. And the sad thing is that we have now gotten to the point where everybody is suspect, and that's not fair or appropriate. Predators are going to get jobs in our school systems. That doesn't mean that everyone in the school system is a predator. But we need to be open and honest with all people. Parents that are going to abuse their children are going to abuse their children. And in my 17 years, there's less than 3% of parents that have children with the intent to abuse them.
3 minutes up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Holly Stevens, and after that, Robert Clegg. And again, if you have written testimony, please let us have it.
I will try to be very brief.
Good. Thank you.
Chair Ward. Good morning, Chair Ward, members of the committee. My name is Holly Stevens. I'm the Director of Public Policy for NAMI New Hampshire. NAMI New Hampshire is a nonprofit grassroots organization that advocates, supports, and educates along the mission of mental health and suicide prevention. I'm here today on behalf of NAMI New Hampshire in opposition to Senate Bill 272, mainly for just a couple of provisions that are in it. NAMI New Hampshire is not anti-parental rights. There are just some provisions that we have some trouble with due to the youth mental health crisis that is going on in our state right now. I just want to highlight a couple of statistics. In New Hampshire, there's 15,000 youth ages 12 to 17 that have depression. In 2019, the YRBS survey was conducted, and it showed that 18.8% of New Hampshire high school students seriously considered suicide and 8.9% attempted suicide. According to the Center for Disease Control, LGBTQ plus youth are a higher risk subset of those youth that I just mentioned, having suicide attempt rates 4 times greater than that of their cisgendered and heterosexual peers. I did include for you the leading causes of death in New Hampshire, and it identifies for 15 to 24-year-olds, it is the second leading cause of death in our state. We have a very high rate of suicide for our youth. Faced with these drastic statistics, because we know that, I also included for you a survey that the Trevor Project did that includes a lot of statistics on LGBTQ plus youth. We know that in New Hampshire, 55% reported experiencing anxiety, 39% seriously considered suicide, 10% attempted it, and that's in our state. Faced with these statistics, we have an urgent priority to do what we can to best support these individuals. And what we know is that affirming environments is the best way to support them. And legislation that calls out specifically a subset of that group, which is transgender youth, alerts them that they are not the same, and it treats them differently than other kids in the school. And that creates a non-affirming environment, not an affirming environment for these kids. Only 47% of LGBTQ youth in New Hampshire see school as an affirming space. That's less than half. And even less, only 18% believe that their community at large is very accepting. And those are kids in our state, and that's the way that they see the community at large. That's the way they see their school systems right now. And legislation like this is only going to make that a greater percentage of youth feeling that they're not accepted. Specifically, as you've heard, the language contained on page 4, lines 12 through 25, is discriminatory on its face and as applied. And I also just wanted to mention that's not in my testimony, written testimony, that section S on medical procedures, as you've heard, it's not defined, it should be defined. And the portion on medical records, we testified on a Senate bill. I've included my written testimony regarding.
Time is up.
Thank you. Regarding those medical
Thank you
records.
very much.
Thank you.
No. It is. It is, yeah, okay. Okay. Holly Stevens, you better take the seat. There's a question here. Hopefully a brief and short one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me give a question. Thank you for taking my question. So I guess my question is around the concept of, I view this bill as a passive bill, meaning that it's not requiring a teacher to notify unless a parent inquires. And a parent inquiry would be because the parent is either seeing something at home they don't understand, or something's going on and they're not getting an answer from their child. So they go to the school, which is the next greatest trusted adult, and says, is something happening with my kid? Considering the statistics you just gave us about suicide rates, isn't it important that parents know what is going on with their child so that they can maybe address that? I mean, we're making an assumption that every parent is negative, but I'm making the assumption that most parents are positive and looking to help their child. And that's why they're going to the school and asking this question, like, what's going on with my kid? They're not I am not getting a good answer. So don't you think that especially when it comes to mental health, the ability for a parent to know that would greatly help and maybe cut down on the suicide rates, considering suicides occur at home, not at school? And so parents knowing what's going on at home is really important.
And I would absolutely agree with you that parents knowing what's going on with their kids in school is very important. But I think that it's also, a parent could be concerned about their child going to school, changing their clothes and wearing different clothes at school than they wear at home. That's not called out in this bill. The only kids that are called out specifically in this bill that apparently teachers have to be honest about are transgender kids. And that is the problem with this bill, is that when you single out transgender kids, one of the statistics that's in here is about how politics are affecting the youth, LGBTQ youth in New Hampshire. And I am remiss to find the exact number, but it's around, it's either 38 or 44% of LGBTQ youth are negatively affected by the politics in our state.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. My question. So we talked about mental health and how it's an issue. If there was a rumor that Billy, the student, is unsure if he is a boy or a girl, and the teacher finds out about that and lets their parents know, wouldn't that negatively affect that student if they weren't ready to tell their parent that?
It could. I think that when you're looking at situations individually, you have to look at the full situation. So I don't know that I could say specifically, yes, that would be detrimental, or no, it wouldn't be detrimental. But I think there is the potential there that it would be. And I think that that's what we have to be cautious about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Robert Clegg. And after that, we have James Rosner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of Aida Fernandolo. She's an MD. She couldn't be here today because she's actually working. And when she called the State House, some elected official told her that it would be better for her to find someone who could read her testimony into the record. So here I am. She says she's a physician and a parent, and she supports Senate Bill 272. The secret social gender transition in schools are a violation of parents' constitutional 14th Amendment rights to direct the upbringing of their children. This practice is done in the name of compassion, and though likely authentic, the compassion is misplaced. Three main misconceptions underscore the misplaced compassion. There is a prevailing misconception that social gender transition is benign. Social gender transition is not, as stated by the National Health Service, who discourages the practice. 61% to 98% of children will outgrow their gender dysphoria without intervention. In one study, 97.5% of the children who were socially transitioned persisted with possible gender dysphoria, maintaining their non-binary or transgender identity 5 years later. This difference in outcome with and without social gender transition reflects a potential mental health intervention. Such an impactful intervention puts children on the path of risky puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and complex gender reassignment surgeries with questionable informed consent from the minor student and no parental consent. Second is there is prevailing misconception that shielding social gender transitions at school will prevent possible abuse at home and improve a child's mental health. Shielding a minor student's gender questioning thoughts from parents under the pretense of preventing abuse is a practice not replicated in any other school scenario that might anger a parent, such as bad grade or disciplinary actions. A true concern for abuse by a mandated reporter should be immediately followed up with a report to the DCYF, Division for Children and Youth Families, and if no report is filed, the concern for abuse is unlikely to be legitimate and demonstrates instead a difference of opinion or values from the student's parents. Furthermore, such secretive policies ignore the fact that parents' involvement is protective against mental health issues in children. There is no long-term evidence to support the claim that gender affirmation and subsequent medical interventions in gender questioning children improve mental health. Rather, there is a long-term evidence that individuals have a higher risk of suicide following sex reassignment surgery. More study is needed. There is a prevailing misconception that if a child questions their gender, they must automatically be transgender. There is no way for school staff or even medical professionals to know if a child who questions their gender has true gender dysphoria. There is no test to confirm the diagnosis. Gender dysphoria has always been exceedingly rare, revealing itself in early childhood in mostly males and persisting through adolescence. The phenomena we are now seeing is an explosive incidence of transgender identification in adolescent girls who demonstrated no transgender tendencies in early childhood and are often clustered in friend groups. Many of these children are concurrently suffering from depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism, and other neuropsychological conditions. Deeming children to be transgender and socially transitioning them in school setting transcends the boundaries of teaching and enters into the realm of medical diagnosis and treatment. Such action should not be undertaken without parental consent. Furthermore, this practice leaves any associated psychological issues undiagnosed and untreated, which does not support the well-being of the child. Please support Senate Bill 272 and place the responsibility and care of children unequivocally in the hands of parents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure.
Sorry, real quick question. Thank you. What is secret social gender transitions?
I don't know. As I said, she's a doctor and I'm reading her statement.
Follow up? Do you believe that's a medical term?
I believe that a doctor has the idea that secret social transitions are happening in schools, if that's what you're asking.
Follow up. So is there a definition to that?
I would imagine there is, but I don't have it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
James Nosser?
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Rosner. I am a state representative in this state. I represent Concord, Ward 8. And I am also a transgender individual myself. I am a trans man. I am here to speak in opposition of this bill, SB 272. I want to speak on what I feel I could have expertise or at least a particular special insight, being a person who grew up with transgender dysphoria. There is a reason that students make their decisions to disclose their identities or their decisions around exploring and expressing their gender. We've heard a lot of testimony about abuse, and I think that it's important to understand that students can be very good at hiding abuse. As a survivor myself, there were teachers who did bring up concerns, but never truly filed. How that happened, I don't really know. I was a child at the time, and, what my parents would say is, well, do you want to be taken away forever and never see me again? Is that what you want? Just to live with strangers that you don't know? And so that quiets you quickly as an adolescent, as a child. And so what's difficult about violating a student's privacy to inform their parents about things is that parents don't always have the best intentions or the resources to help in those ways. We've heard a lot about children then going on to pursue medical interventions, but those are not things that can happen for a minor without the consent of an adult, without the education of an adult, without medical intervention with a physician. And even so, if we did want to get into these things unrelated to the bill, all of the largest medical associations agree that the treatment for gender dysphoria is transitional healthcare, and we do have a rigorous process of psychological evaluation and intervention before people can go to do these procedures. For me, you needed to be on testosterone for at least a year and have a letter from a psychologist or somebody with a doctorate in order to have, a mastectomy.
20 seconds left. 20 seconds left.
Okay. So I say that all to hopefully give you an insight. I know a lot of other people have great statistics and quotes. I will give a more expanded version of this on email, but I wanted to speak as a person who experienced these things as to why this could be harmful and detrimental to the safety of students. Thank you.
Thank you. Celia Oliver, New Hampshire Psychological Association.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you very much for listening to my verbal testimony. I'm Dr. Celia Oliver, and I'm representing the New Hampshire Psychological Association. We have submitted written testimony. So I'm going to keep this fairly brief. I want to be clear that we support parental rights. However, we oppose this bill. And as you've heard from others, it is particularly the sections around, in my mind, kind of targeting the students who might have gender identity issues or sexual orientation issues. And of course, we always, even with my own caseload, I saw a lot of children in my practice. I always encouraged them to be upfront and truthful and direct with their parents. And yet, confidentiality is there for a reason. Confidentiality for adult clients and also for children, because sometimes you just need a safe space to kind of sort things out before you go, if you're a child, to your parent, because those relationships are important. Most parents do not abuse their children. So my concern as a psychologist and my colleagues' concerns is around protecting and promoting the quality of that relationship between parents and children, and having kids have a safe space to explore some of those things. And one of those places is often schools. So we know that if kids are silenced, then the anxiety increases, depression increases, and as you've already heard from other presenters, suicide rates increase. So that's why we're concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Thank you. So I guess I'm trying to struggle with the idea that absent this bill, we have lawyers who have client privileges, right? They can't say what their clients is. Doctors can't talk about what their patients say. And now, without this law, we're saying that teachers also have that some sort of affirmative right like that, to not disclose information to their parents. They have some sort of protection.
I'm saying that if teachers are required to answer honestly, it might be something that they're thinking, this kid is going to work this out, and they're keeping it private and giving that space to a child to be able to work things out. And to essentially be required then to out a kid to the parent before the kid is ready. That's where we see the harm being done, potentially, to that relationship and also to the minor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sally Stanley, Stouty. Stouty, okay. And again, remember, 3 minutes.
Thank you. This bill proposes that parents have a fundamental right and responsibility to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their minor children. But I believe it should state that parents have the fundamental right, as no one knows what children need, should strive for, and can do better than their parents. For over 2 years, I have been exposing the terrible job that the Dover schools have been doing in educating the children in those schools for the last 10 years. The curriculum has gone from Common Core and proficiency scores of 78% to far worse academic preparation with competency-based education. All the flowery language used to describe what is being done in education only serves to intentionally confuse parents into believing their kids are actually being educated in our public schools, but that is not the case. The schools are using more and more of their funding to institute their progressive ideology of racism, social justice, and social emotional learning, finding out the kids' values and beliefs, and then using school counselors and mental health as a cover to change those beliefs and institute gender confusion and war on traditional family values. And that is the bottom line. Public schools do not want parents in charge of decisions for their children involving morals, medical decisions, or basic values. They fully plan to usurp this power and replace parents with the school and others in power making their important decisions. Do not be mistaken, this is an all-out war on the traditional family values. Senate Bill 272 must be passed and signed into law as it should have been last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Urschel, followed by Liz Barber. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Ward. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Chris Urschel, and I'm an attorney with GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. That's GLAD. I'm a New Hampshire licensed attorney, but I live and work in Boston. I am here to discuss the provisions that most people have been talking about, starting on page 4, line 12, going through line 25. I agree with much of what the prime sponsor of the bill said in her testimony earlier. Schools should be working in partnership with parents for the well-being of all students, and you know, I'm glad has taken that position forever, and that includes for the well-being of transgender and gender nonconforming students. But I want to make the point that if the legislature wished to make a law that prohibited providing misinformation or lying to parents, the legislature could do that without singling out a vulnerable minority student group. And by singling out transgender and gender nonconforming students with subsections S, T, U, V, the law is doing something different than making a rule about, the bill is doing something different than making a rule that prohibits lying to parents. And singling out one vulnerable group of students for different treatment under the law is not just sending the wrong message to those students, it's also violating the constitutional protections that ensure that everybody comes before the law as equals. I also want to point out that in the text of the bill, there is a standard that's set out that school personnel have an obligation to provide truthful and complete information. That's a standard that's not defined in the bill and doesn't exist anywhere else in the law, as far as I know. And so it does something more than prohibit lying. It prohibits anything short of truthful and complete information, which is a standard that we don't know exactly what it means. And as an attorney, I can tell you that is an invitation to extensive litigation on the question. And so without any standard to apply, that's going to be a nightmare for schools to be able to meet the standard. And, you know, I just also want to point out that teacher A and, you know, school administrator B and, you know, school counselor C all have different interactions with each student. And there's no central depository of information where a parent can go and get every piece of information about every interaction with their child. So for anyone to have complete and total untenable, again, the primary reason that that these provisions should be amended is because they single out one group of students for different treatment, and that's transgender and gender nonconforming
15
students.
seconds.
Finally, the provision that requires schools to provide information to parents about what clubs their children are in is really harmful to students who are joining clubs or attending meetings because they want to explore aspects of their identity. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. Senator Fenton.
Thank you for being here and taking my question. Health came up a lot. Is being non-gender conforming a health decision?
Students who experience gender dysphoria, students who experience gender
Push your mic.
No.
For individuals who experience gender dysphoria, that is a health condition. Many people are gender non-conforming without experiencing gender dysphoria. And for those individuals, there's no health condition.
Thank you.
Senator Lang.
Thank you. So my question is around, I believe you're in the audience when I was asking my question before about a parent who inquires because their child is showing behaviors at home and they can't get an answer from the child as to why. So they go to the next trusted adult, the school, and says, what's going on with my kid, right? And so my question revolves around the idea of, we heard from NAMI talking about suicidal rates in this community and how they're higher than the average teenager. And we know that most suicides occur at home, not at school. So the parent comes in and asks a question of the school in this possibly of this nature, and the school doesn't tell them. And then the child ultimately goes home and commits suicide. Does the school have any liability for a wrongful death?
That's a really interesting question. You may be aware that there are legal in New Hampshire Supreme Court decision that involves a challenge. Thank you. That involves a challenge to challenging whether or not a school is liable for not taking affirmative steps to prevent suicide when the school had information to do so. And the New Hampshire Supreme Court said there was no liability in that case. However, I think that the question, the hypothetical, overlooks the general conversations that happen, which typically when an educator or other school personnel are asked questions about a student's well-being, especially when that school official is, has observed things that raise cause for concern, that's an excellent opportunity for the partnership between parents and schools to play out. And it often does because schools are in an excellent position to provide resources to families who might be struggling with understanding what's going on with their kids. And so nothing in this bill changes what would normally happen, except that it creates the specter of liability if a school official says the wrong thing. And so I hope that answers your question.
I guess I'm trying to understand. So the difference is last year's bill was a mandatory reporting, right? If a student said something, you must tell the parent. This is not. So my question is, because the parent is taking an affirmative action and going in and talking to the teacher and saying, I'm observing something, and I can't explain it. And I'm hoping you can help me understand what's going on with my child, right? Because I'm not getting information from the child. And the school knows that the child's going through I hate to use the phrase gender dysphoria, but a questioning situation there. And the school does not tell. And then the child ultimately harms themselves, knowing that the school had information and chose not to release it. The question is there a legal liability on the school for not releasing that information, especially given the statistics of that community?
As I said before, there is one New Hampshire Supreme Court case that tangentially addresses this issue and found no liability for the school district. Whether or not, the scenario that you laid out would result in liability, it would be really fact specific, right? Again, I think that those conversations are really an excellent entry point for school personnel to say, oh, this is a really important conversation you should be having with your kid. Do you need extra support to have that conversation? Do you want to connect with a school psychologist, a school social worker, a guidance counselor, somebody with expertise in this area? We can help facilitate that. But that is not the same as saying that every school official has all school personnel, including just a random, phys ed teacher, has this obligation to provide complete and truthful information, an undefined concept, which would result in liability for the school district if they fail to meet that standard. So I think that it's really important for schools to take opportunities like that to meet parents where they are and have important conversations. I don't think this bill is the vehicle for making that happen.
Senator Fenton?
Thank you. I think you kind of answered my question. So I was having trouble finding where teachers are trained in having these conversations with parents that their child may be gender transitioning or gay or anything like that. And I couldn't find any training manual on this. So my question is, let's say Mrs. Smith, my history teacher, now has to tell that parent. Are they trained in that to talk to the parent or even talk about issues they may not even understand?
That's a really good question. I just want to point out that during a school day, teachers interact with students. Every single student is going through identity development issues, so many of which teachers are unprepared to deal with in any material way. And teachers are always constantly in a position of interacting with students during this period of time where they're developing their identities, they're figuring out who they are. They might be doing exactly what their parents don't want them to be doing, and that could mean a Muslim student not wearing a hijab in the classroom, or it could mean a Jewish student who's deciding not to eat kosher food at school, right? And are school teachers equipped? Do they have the necessary training and skill to help students navigate this? Well, there's no way that a teacher could be specialized in all the different areas of identity development that would be necessary to give all the guidance and support that a student needs. That's why, first of all, it's really important for schools to have resources like guidance counselors, school psychologists, and school social workers to help with students who have these specialized issues or whatever. That's why parents need to be involved in their children's education. But that's also why this bill falls far short from addressing any of the needs we're talking about, because it singles out one characteristic of identity development for different treatment than all the others, and it fails to provide any framework for actually helping schools have the resources that they need to provide students with the best support possible and their families.
Thank you. Okay, you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for joining us this morning. So just to be clear, when I look at a majority of this bill working up to page 4, it's affirming what's already in statute. Okay, so this isn't new in terms of schools, parents and children. But when we get to page 4 and we start, around line 12, moving our way down, so T, U, V, and W, what I hear you saying is the way that this is singled out basically puts discrimination, puts a discriminatory precedence in this legislation.
Correct. It singles out one class of students for a different level of surveillance, a different reporting standard that doesn't apply to other students, which is per se discriminatory. And, in my view, it'd be violative of state and federal constitution.
Thank you.
All set?
All set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for their questions, and I'll be submitting written testimony subsequently.
Liz Barber, followed by Emma Savigny from New Futures. So, Liz Barber.
In support, but my points have been brought up, so thank you very much for hearing testimony in support.
You didn't want to speak, Liz Barber?
My points have already been raised.
Oh, okay.
Respect your time.
Thank you very much. Emily? Emma, I'm sorry.
Happens all the time. Thank you. Thank you for hearing us today on this bill.
Remember, 3 minutes.
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
As you mentioned, my name is Emma Savini. I'm the Children's Behavioral Health Policy Coordinator at New Futures. New Futures is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that advocates, collaborates, and educates for the health and wellness of all Granite Staters. We are here in opposition of 272 because it prevents students from establishing support networks outside of their homes, which has been shown to be a mitigating factor for adverse childhood experiences, commonly known as ACEs. As Granite Staters, we all envision a community for our child to grow, thrive, and learn, where they can express themselves and receive support from other trusted adults. Unfortunately, this bill creates a difficulty with that shared vision because it reduces the ability for a child to reach out in confidence to a teacher or a friend or a trusted adult without fear of a parent's interference. As you heard today, there are a lot of concerns, very valid concerns for the LGBTQ contained in this bill. And we just wanted to point out this other subsection of children who would be experiencing something such as substance abuse, mental illness, domestic violence, a messy divorce at home. These are all considered ACEs, and these ACEs have huge lifelong impacts on children. The good news is that mitigating factors and protective factors are available for our children. One of the most effective is being able to reach out to a trusted adult. Many communities in New Hampshire have already started to implement programs within schools, within police departments, within just general communities to incorporate these protective factors for our children to access as needed. A bill such as this would reduce the ability for children to reach out to these protective factor programs and would have a chilling effect on a child's trust in other adults outside of their home. Because children would be fearful of parents interfering. If passed, this bill would reinstitute barriers that we have worked so hard to take down. However, New Hampshire has been and is continued to be recognized as a national innovator in programs for children experiencing trauma and advancing positive health outcomes. If you'd like to continue seeing New Hampshire thrive and be a national innovator in these categories, you should oppose this bill. For the reasons presented, New Futures would ask that the committee vote this bill inexpedient to legislate. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce the name. It looks like TA with a big D in the middle.
Tina, maybe?
Tina D, somebody? No, not that right. I can read that handwriting. The one that's above it, I can't read. It looks like a big T, and then and then a big D, and then the last name starts with an S. Anybody recognizes it? Okay, well, then we'll just continue. How about Eloise Platt? Followed by Deborah House.
Elaine Plant from Dover, New Hampshire. Just a parent, not an organization. I believe wholeheartedly, as this bill states, that parents have the fundamental right and responsibility to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their minor children. And in order to meaningfully and effectually exercise this right, no educational institution may withhold information about a child, the child's health, the child's school environment, or their child's in-school behavior from the child's parent or parents. It is the child's parents who have the responsibility, means, and resources to ensure the child's health care, support, religious guidance, moral values, to develop into happy, productive members of society. Any adult in this room has once been a minor. Many of us have raised minors. There is a period of time in the family unit where pushback happens between adults and minors, and as they mature into adulthood, the role of a teacher, school personnel, paraprofessional, or social worker does not then replace the role of a parent in matters of mental, emotional, physical health, or otherwise. The duty is to inform the parent when the concerns arise with the student. Gender dysphoria is present in my family circle. In researching this topic, I came across information regarding the American School Counselors Association. In their training program titled No Limits, counselors in training were taught to lie, undermine, and withhold information from parents. There is a video of them detailing this in their own words that you can see for yourself at courageisahabit.org by Alvin Lloyd. Our schools have become unsafe places for our children with this kind of training taking place. And the surveys mentioned earlier by the NAMI rep spoke of our suspect because of the dynamiting process that these surveys are presented in. These surveys become self-fulfilling prophecies in the way that they are presented. That information is also available at courageisahabit.org. Parents need to be informed of all the sources and training qualifications of the classroom teachers, school personnel, paraprofessionals, and social workers with regard to any health care, especially because we know of this undermining through the American School Counseling Association. No counsel should be given without a parent's consent. The NAMI rep also mentioned about politics, being involved and students being upset by that. I think that's happening in our school systems and starting with things like the gay BCs. A is for activist. So it is not, it's coming, the activism is coming from all directions.
10 seconds.
Okay, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. So we have now Deborah House. Followed by Thad Riley.
Okay, good morning, Senator Ward.
Good morning.
Yes, good to see you. My name is Deborah Howes. I am with the American Federation of Teachers New Hampshire. It's good here to be with the Senate Education Committee again. I'm here on behalf of our 4,000 members across the state to speak in opposition of this bill. While we support parental rights and working with parents, in our schools, we cannot support this bill as it is written. And I have written testimony, but I will try and just hit some of the key points because many of them have already been expressed. We know that the best thing for our students is working in partnership with parents, and we try to do that whenever we can. And the best thing we can have is engaged parents who really want to be partners with us in their students' education, but not every student has an ideal situation. This bill does have some vague language that concerns us, where there are rights that are referred to but not enumerated. So when you have a bill that does that, but then threatens lawsuits against you if you somehow violate those, unlisted rights, it is of great concern. That does not foster a partnership relationship, because how do you know when you are violating a right that is not even really described? In schools, we have a serious obligation, even under our code of conduct, to treat all our students with dignity and respect. And that's really, besides the vagueness of the law and the violations, that's at the heart of our opposition to this bill. We do not want to be put in a situation where we're being asked to treat any students with disrespect, to make them feel unwelcome, or to break our trust with them. We are always being encouraged, as teachers, we are told we have to build relationships with our students so that we can work together on the academics, but also just to function in the classroom. And it's not that we are saying, please come tell us, everything that's going on in your life and trying to act instead of parents. But there are times when you notice that a student is behaving a little differently, they're looking sad, and you might ask what is going on. A student may choose to disclose something to you.
30 seconds.
You're now a keeper of information. You don't want to have to betray that trust if the student does not give you permission. You've got an obligation to respect that student's trust. Do not make us break trust with our students. The state has a program called One Trusted Adult that is rolled out to all schools, encouraging students, encouraging teachers who work with their students to see them as trusted adults. And this bill actually would go right in the face of undermining that relationship building that we've been working on.
That's 3 minutes.
Okay, so I will pass out the testimony, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Do you think teachers have an obligation to be honest with parents?
We have an obligation to be as honest as we can be, but also not betray the trust of our students. I mean, you've got dueling obligations. We have to treat our students with respect as well. So it is a very deeply felt obligation to the students. And I think so let me answer it this way. If a parent came to me and said, I think my student might be questioning their gender identity, my answer would probably be, That's very interesting. That's probably a conversation you might want to have, and here is a resource such as a guidance counselor or someone that you might want to talk to. I would try to help the parent find a way to start that conversation that didn't directly, betray the student's trust in me, but channeled it in a way that maybe was able to help make a connection that is beyond my skill set and maybe beyond the parent's experience. But maybe, put it in a direction that was going to lead to an outcome that could be helpful.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yes.
So again, I guess to summarize, I'm guessing what you're saying is that it depends.
Well, I would rather you don't put words in my mouth. I really don't appreciate that I'm giving you an answer that's trying to take into account the nuances of the situation and what students would be going through and the loyalties that we have to the students that are in our charge every day. But if you want to put words in my mouth, I guess that's what you can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Fenton. Wait a minute.
Yep, okay.
Senator Fenton.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for taking my question. Currently, a pediatrician does not have to inform their parent that a child may be gender conforming or transitioning. But under this, a history teacher would have to, someone with no background in health or medicine or anything like that. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding of it, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thad Riley, followed by Kevin Lutz.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Thad Riley, and I'm here to speak this morning on behalf in support of SB 272 and behalf of moms and dads throughout the Granite State. Together, my wife and I have 6 kids, 4 of whom are still young enough to attend New Hampshire public schools. We have 3 high schoolers, 1 7th grader, and as a former school board member, and most importantly as a dad, I've been extremely involved in their public school education for most of their lives. To put it in different terms, if you add up all the years of our kids being in New Hampshire public schools, that's 54 years, and that's a whole lot of time. As you are beyond aware, we are a divided New Hampshire, and that means our communities are divided, and that means our public schools, which are a reflection of our communities, are divided as well. For centuries, our differences were embraced and only made us better. But in today's world, so many have fallen prey to the addiction of labeling and separating us from our neighbors. And this separation by labels leads to confusion, miscommunication, and distrust. And in nowhere do we see more confusion, miscommunication, and distrust than in our public schools. Everybody wants a villain in turbulent times, someone or something they can point at to blame. Well, we have a villain, and that villain is any idea or person that engages in actions to directly separate parents from their children and causing communication divides within the family. We've seen colossal communication problems in our country and in New Hampshire for several years. And now many political ideologues who shove their way into our schools want to make it even worse by having secretive talks with our children while never bringing their mom and dad into the most crucial conversations in their precious young lives. Your choice is simple. You can be a hero to the families and support SB 272, or the villain who stands against children and generations to come. Thank you to our state senators who sponsored and supported this bill. For the lost senators who stand against it, do you understand the potential colossal damage you could do to the next generation if you empower the idea of separating children from their parents? Are you going to let a few bad apples and crazy political ideologues with a radicalized agenda destroy our children's future? I'm on the front lines. I see this all the time. I want to tell you what this is. This is the hill to die on. This is the fight worth getting beat up and bloodied over. This is what it's all about. It's all about our children. It's all about their future. Support the parental rights bill. Leave the politics behind and do what's right for our children. And when all of this is gone and when you've moved on, you'll always have this one moment to look back and to know without a doubt you've changed lives for the better for our children and for the generations to come. Thank you.
15 seconds left.
I'm done. If there's any questions.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So we
Have
have
a good day.
Kevin Luce, followed by Laura Alazam.
Thank you very much for letting me talk.
In 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm a parent in New Hampshire. I've spent most of my adult life in New Hampshire, and I have 2 kids in New Hampshire. I believe that this bill would be very detrimental to my son's growth throughout the school. Mostly because I want my son to be able to be confident to come and talk to me on his own terms without having to have me come to talk to him and say, well, this is what your teacher told me. This is what your teacher is telling me is happening in school. And just ruining that line of communication between me and him. My daughter is not old enough to go to school yet, and I want to be able to have that line of communication as well. I just want us to have a certain amount of trust between us that isn't interfered with by a teacher. I think that I speak for most parents when I say that I was not ready to become a parent. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think any parent knows what they're doing. And I think that having to make snap decisions for the care of your child when a teacher comes and says this is what's happening is a bit of a bit of a rash thing to do. I love my son, and I want him to be able to have, again, that trust that he can come to me when he's ready. That's really all I really wanted to say. Thank you very much for letting me
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Laura Alazam.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Laura Alazam. I'm from Londonderry, and a lot of people have made a lot of good points. I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. I'm here in support of this bill, and I thank you for those of you who co-sponsored and will stand up for this. First thing is, there is no consensus on the value of affirmation. If there was, then clinics in Sweden, Finland, and the UK that have been performing pediatric gender surgery for decades would not have been closed in recent years, and treatment protocols amended to better address the serious psychiatric diagnoses that usually accompany gender dysphoria. There's a lot of room for disagreement on this topic without vilifying parents who deviate from the teacher's opinion as abusers or potential abusers. I think that this bill is not discriminatory at all, but it merely affords parents of all children, not just the parents of children who are presenting as their biological sex, but the parents of all children, the dignity of truthful treatment by school employees. And finally, the crux of this issue is really who gets to make the determination of what is in the child's best interest. Those speaking in opposition to this bill today are expressing a view that someone in the school has the right to make that determination. That if they see that there could be a problem with the parent, if they think it might make the child uncomfortable, then they get to make the decision of what's in the best interest of the child, and potentially not tell the parents or even lie to the parents about it. And this is just not okay by any stretch of the imagination. Unless there's a compelling state interest to override the parental prerogative, the parent must be empowered to care for their child at all times. And in particular, with the population in the paragraphs T, U, and V, it's of special concern because of the serious psychiatric and psychological problems that tend to accompany this. But again, it's not discriminatory. Those paragraphs, I believe, are in this bill particularly because so many instances of abuse of parents' rights have come out in the news that now it needs to be addressed explicitly. But all
30 seconds.
Yeah, all that we're asking is that all parents be treated with the dignity of truth. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I didn't call another one. Breer Zephyr, followed by Brian Blackhorn. So who is in rep hall?
Yeah, a lot of people that signed up, they've gone over to some of the house.
Oh, I see.
So they may not be here.
Okay, Keith Howard. Brian Blackhorn. Followed by Sarah Perashino.
Good morning. I'm Brian Blackton from Concord. I am a supporter of this bill. I am a conservative, former police officer, federal firearms licensee, independent Baptist who has a King James Bible on my nightstand. That may scare some people in here today because when the Twin Towers were hit, I was teaching a 7th grade English class. Some may assume I took the opportunity to try to indoctrinate my students to believe my beliefs that day, but I did not. I taught the daily curriculum. I firmly believe parents are in charge of their child's education, not indoctrinated to another person's direction. That was attempted on me, thank God not to today's levels, but it was to my children. I do not believe any school has the power or right to not inform the parents of any aspect of their children's education, health, or try to indoctrinate their moral, gender, or religious beliefs upon them. That is a parent's job and a parent's right. By taking God out of our school, this is part of the outcome that has happened. I think the way to fix this problem is to remove children from public school if the parents are not heard and if this bill is not passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Sarah Perashino didn't want to speak. How about Haley Brown? Followed by Emery Banfield.
Hello, my name is Haley Brown. I am here to testify today in opposition to SB 272. I believe from my own experience that this bill would put New Hampshire children at risk of harm. I grew up in a violent religious household. When I was 8 years old, a close relative was outed to my family as queer. My family's reaction made it extremely clear to me that I could not safely come out to them when I was in their household. Looking in, no outsider could have predicted this danger. Like many abusers, my parents maintained a curated reputation as excellent parents. They coached us to prepare for investigations by Child Protective Services and had a long list of lies we had to practice and were expected to tell people outside of our family. No one outside of our home could have adequately assessed the danger outing me presented. As was mentioned earlier by some of the other presenters, there was discussion that that teachers spend less time with children than their parents, and that they could not assess whether or not a child adequately was in danger. And it confounds me that this was implied then that we shouldn't believe the children in this scenario. Because they are correct. Teachers do not spend enough time, no one does, to know on their own whether or not a child would be in danger from being outed, which is reason to believe the child when they say they are in danger. No other form of abuse do we say that a child is too young to disclose sexual abuse. We do not say that a child is too young to disclose physical abuse. Why are we implying that a child is too young to adequately assess their own danger in their households from homophobic abuse from their families? People have been mentioning that most parents don't want to harm or abuse their children, and this is true. I am a Christian, though, and I was raised on the story of Jesus talking about the shepherd leaving the 99 lambs to go after the one. And that is what it sounds to me is being proposed here, is that we are talking about abandoning the one child, the kids who will be abused, in favor of some vague benefit to the majority of children. One child who is violently abused because of this bill is too many.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. So let me just, did any one of the people who were not available earlier come back? Keith Howard or Bree Zephyr? Okay. Then I will call Ariel Moore. And after Emma, is Emery Banfield here? Yes. Emery Banfield followed by Ariel Moore. And the 3 minutes.
Good morning, honorable members of the Senate Education Committee. My name is Anne Marie Banfield. I'm a parental rights advocate in New Hampshire focused on academic excellence in education, and I do support SB 272. I'm going to skip some of my testimony, but I will send it to you in an email. I will highlight some of the more glaring problems that pit parents against their schools. This can also drive a division between parent and child. If you read my emails in the last few weeks, you know that school administrators are not following the law and ethical codes of conduct by assessing and treating the mental health of students without informed consent by parents. And you know that children attending some of our public schools have had their mental health data shared with outside organizations like Plymouth State, Antioch, and Keene State. This is in violation of the school counselor's code of ethics. School counselors are to maintain privacy on those records, but that is not happening in our public schools. Parents have been shocked when I share this information with them. Everybody keeps talking about this targeting. Well, parents were targeted in school board policy JBAB, which is still in many of our schools, including Manchester. This policy was developed by the New Hampshire School Boards Association. This policy included a provision that told staff that they must lie to parents now. That's who's been targeted. The school policy says school personnel should not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender status or gender nonconforming presentation to others, including parents. So that's why this is in this law. Schools are following this policy. Because of JBAB policy, there's a lawsuit in Manchester. The case is now being taken to the Supreme Court, where it is currently pending. The parent was never given due process, and this policy assumes that all parents are neglectful and would harm their own children if school personnel were honest with them. We now have policies in place that require school personnel to lie to loving parents. This child was transferred out of the Manchester School District and now is in a charter school. Anti-parent policies drive many families away from their public schools. So when you see the declining enrollment, now you know where it's coming from. Everything should be made transparent unless there is a legal reason. Some administrators have not been forthcoming on information filed in right to know requests. There's another lawsuit pending. All right, I won't read the rest of it, but you should know that there is a father who sued in Florida because his daughter attempted to commit suicide 2 times. The school encouraged others to call her a boy's name while not notifying the parent. And that girl tried to commit suicide twice, and then he finally found out. So this is the problem that we're seeing in our schools is information. They don't have to report this to parents, but if a parent inquires, FERPA already says that a parent has a right to review their child's records. So this is, to me, affirms what's already in federal law that's being ignored in this JBAB policy.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Lang?
So as a former school board member and looking at the JBAB policy put out by the New Hampshire School Board Association, if I understand that policy right, I'm looking to you to confirm, I guess, is that what that policy says, that in one instance, in the purposes of records, they'll keep the legal name and the legal pronoun. In another instance, it requires or otherwise it's a violation of the policy if a teacher refuses to call a child by their transgender name and transgender pronoun. It would be a violation the teacher can be disciplined for. But then in the third case, it specifically says that teachers can't tell parents and they must use the legal name and the legal pronoun. So in instances, we're telling them it's okay here, it's not okay here, and it's okay here. Is that your reading of that policy?
I think there's a big problem with the policy in many forms, but you brought up a few of them. There's other problems that I have with it. However, in this instance, in this specific portion of that under the privacy provision in JBAB policy, it specifically states to lie to parents. I mean, it specifically gives the teacher the direction that they cannot share this information. And so when I have parents contacting the school, which very, very rarely happens. I mean, it almost never happens. But in this case, it did happen by a loving, concerned parent that, they're not required to tell the parent any information. So you put that teacher in the position of either having to just remain silent or lie to a parent. So, with all the other statements up here saying that we're targeting transgender children in this law, well, parents have been targeted in this policy. This is a reaction to that. Maybe if we didn't have this policy in place, this portion of the law wouldn't have to be addressed. We would, to me, when you have a FERPA law that says parents can inspect records, they should be able to see all the records. And that includes that. So now we're putting this divide between parent and child. But yeah, there's so many problems with that policy. And I inquired with the New Hampshire School Boards Association. They have withdrawn their support for this, but it does remain in some of our schools. And this is a big problem. It's unbelievable that we're telling school staff that they can lie to parents.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ariel Moore, followed by Linz Jacobs. She's not here? Okay. How about Linz Jacobs? Okay, you're here?
I'm Linz.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Linz Jakehouse. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a founder of 603 Equality. I am non-binary, which to me means just a person, not a woman or man, and I strongly oppose SB 272. This bill requires parental notification of what extracurricular activities, clubs, or organizations their child is participating in. Nobody ever got kicked out of their home for joining the chess club, but for any LGBTQ high schooler who's ever found refuge in a Gender Sexuality Alliance, GSA, it's easy to see how this bill could have devastating consequences. If my father had gotten a notification that I was a member of a GSA at my high school, he would have found out when the club meets and made it his personal mission to make sure I was not attending. I know this because he would regularly attend school events like football games to monitor me, even though I was never doing anything harmful to myself or others. When he found out I had feelings for my best friend and that we would kiss sometimes by hacking into my personal internet accounts, he told me homosexuality was disgusting and immoral and not how I was raised, took away my phone, and there was a moment when I thought I might be sent to conversion therapy, which was legal where I grew up in the early 2000s. I was limited to applying only to colleges that specifically did not affirm LGBTQ students. He gaslighted me by telling me I wasn't queer, just confused. He constantly criticized and shamed me to the point of talking about me like my true self was an entirely different person and that I was only worthy of love if I adhered exactly to his worldview, and told me that I was so immoral that he was concerned for the state of my soul. This never changed, continuing into my adulthood until I told him I could no longer keep contact with him under those circumstances at the age of 29. Because of this, I never felt safe coming out to him as non-binary. These are also the reasons why I gradually came out to a few close friends and teachers at my high school, because I desperately needed the few people I trusted to accept me. Through therapy, I've now learned to call the sum of these actions emotional abuse. This bill says nothing in this chapter shall authorize a parent of a minor child in the state to engage in contact that is unlawful or to abuse or neglect a minor child in violation of general law, but the fact is it does enable abuse. The state does not find a compelling interest to stop the type of abuse I experienced in high school, but that does not negate that it was, in fact, abuse. Much abuse slips under the cracks and does not rise to a recognizable level in front of others. I'm also concerned about the line in this bill that states the right to be informed of and provide consent to any medical procedure or treatment performed on a child except pursuant to RSAs or in the provision of an emergency medical treatment. If I understand medical procedure or treatment to include mental health, a bill like this would have stopped me from getting mental health treatment via a school counselor, as my father routinely both told me and my brother that we needed a priest, not a therapist, whenever we asked to see someone for our mental health. This would get rid of the last lifeline LGBTQ young people in schools can access. Please vote ITL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No questions. Thank you. Zach Hill?
Good morning, Senators. My name is Zoe Hill, and I am a 16-year-old junior at Lebanon High School. I am here today to oppose SB 272. This bill will not directly affect me because I am lucky enough to have parents who support me and my identity as a trans kid. But I know multiple people in my school who could face harm if this bill passes. They are out in school but not necessarily at home because their families might not accept them. If this bill passes and their parents found out they are trans, then their homes could become an even more dangerous place for them. In conclusion, please oppose this bill for the sake of trans kids across the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Karen Leot Hill? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Senate Education Committee. I am the mom of Zoe Hill, and I'm very proud of you. I'm an 18-year city councilor in Lebanon and the mother of 2 children, one of whom you just heard. I'm 44. I was born in 1978. I grew up in a small, charismatic evangelical church, and I remember very well that the topic of homosexuality was very taboo. I remember one Sunday when I was about 10 years old that the pastor of our church rebuked his son, who he had recently learned was gay, and made him leave the church. A couple of years later, my best friend's older brother was outed to their parents, and they kicked him out of the house. Sadly, these things that happened 30 years ago are not relics of the past. And although most parents truly do want what's best for their children and do want to engage in the type of open communication that most families enjoy, it's not true for everyone. And unfortunately, there are some young people who, if they are outed at home, can be in a dangerous situation. To me, this bill is about health and safety and what's in the best interest of children who may not have the best circumstances at home. We know that teenagers face mental health crises in New
30
Hampshire.
seconds.
And we know that queer teenagers, especially trans youth, who are not able to express themselves freely, are at the greatest risk of harming themselves. This legislation has the potential to put many New Hampshire youth into traumatic and stressful situations, and I ask in the interest of safety and health of our children who may not have the parental support they need at home to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Courtney Reed?
Thank you, Senator. Do we have 3 minutes to speak or is it less time?
Pardon?
How much time do we have to speak?
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator. And thank you, members of the committee. My name is Courtney Reed, and I'm here with the ACLU of New Hampshire to testify in opposition to SB 272, primarily for the main reasons that we've heard earlier this morning. Firstly, SB 272 singles out transgender youth for a special tier of surveillance in schools, and we know that teens and youth identify in many different ways and explore their identity, whether it be through religious beliefs and practices, political views, their sexuality, or professional aspirations. However, the bill's language specifically targets transgender individuals by prompting educators and school staff to survey the teens' behaviors and preferences that are deeply linked to their gender expression and identity. And because trans youth are subject to this level of surveillance and unconsented disclosure of personal information that their cis peers are not, SB 272 undermines existing state and federal protections afforded to granted staters. New Hampshire offers constitutional and statutory protections for transgender individuals to be free from discrimination on the basis of sex and gender identity, and there are federal protections in Supreme Court rulings that prevent discrimination regarding to this identity as well. And relating to clubs, SB 272's disclosure requirement concerning extracurricular activities can also leave LGBTQ students without access to a safe or affirming environment, which we know has been shown through scientific evidence to reduce mental distress. And we've seen in research that GSAs have demonstrated to have a positive effect on mental health for LGBTQ or questioning students. Students involved in GSAs were less likely to miss school and have shown to experience lower levels of victimization related to their identity. It's important to make sure that students feel like they can freely and safely access those spaces without the fear of the consequences of their parents being informed of those things. And lastly, I want to add that SB 272 puts educators at risk if they aren't in compliance with the legislation's vague reporting requirements. Teachers are asked to answer their parents' questions about their child's gender identity truthfully and completely. Yet the standard is vague and leaves a teacher in school at risk of facing litigation from a parent.
30 seconds.
And I lastly just want to wrap up by underscoring that the legislation unjustly targets transgender youth. For a lot of transgender youth, especially those who can't feel safe at home, school may be one of the few places for them to be themselves. And we shouldn't enable a certain set of parents to demand that public schools allow them to control their child in a way, and instead just ensure that kids feel safe and ready to explore their identities at their own pace. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Michelle Gillig-Foury. You have to save that name.
Silly Foisey.
Gillig-Foury, okay, welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Senate Education Committee members. My name is Michelle Silly Foisey, and I am here to read testimony from a mom that lives in my town. My name is Adrienne Robbins, and I am from Temple. I am a lifelong New Hampshire resident, and I am urging you to oppose SB 272. My child came out to my husband and I as transgender when she was 16 years old. She was out at school with friends and certain trusted teachers before coming out to us. We are an accepting family, and she was still scared to tell us. Being out and accepted at school is what gave her the courage to tell us. I fear that this bill will leave kids with unaccepting families with no safe place to exist and no adults to put their trust in. Not all families are kind and loving. Kids need to be able to trust teachers. Kids need people they can put their trust in. Please, I urge you to oppose SB 272. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nancy Biederman?
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I am a former teacher of 15 plus years. I have an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in early childhood education. I have seen kids and I taught kids from kindergarten to 8th grade. I have seen them come in complaining about their parents, saying, hey, I didn't like what they served for breakfast. I didn't like what they made me wear to school. And yes, it went all the way up to high school and I substituted and I'd have the same complaints that their parent was unfair, unjust. And if I listened to those complaints and I said, oh, if you're going to tell me something that could be harmful to you or someone else, and I didn't go to that parent because, oh, they didn't like, and they made you change what you wore to school today, that parent can't be trusted. That's not acceptable. I always made sure my students knew that if they did confide in me and told me something, that I would be informing their parents. That was a rule in my classroom. And that was a rule in most of the school districts that I worked in. If a situation arose, there was always a framework and a procedure for what to do if you got information from a child. I have had numerous parents come up to me, especially middle school parents that would come up to me and say, I think there's something wrong. I think they might be doing drugs. And I'm like, well, if you think it, then you need to act on it and you need to go to your family doctor and take care of that. And I will keep an eye out here at school and see if I hear or see anything. And if I did, I would report back to the parents because that is a health concern and that is a danger. Most teachers see that student for 180 days in a year. That's it, 180 days. If you're a kindergarten teacher, which I was, that's down to 90 days with a half-day program. There is no way that you know that student. And as a middle school teacher, I didn't just have 25 kids. I had 130, 140 students. There is no way that I would know the ins and outs of every family and every student. And for anyone to assume that a teacher has that knowledge is ridiculous. And no, they do not have the right to know and make judgment on any parent. And yes, teachers are trusted, but trusted does not equal that they have the right to keep secrets. So I am in support of SB 272, if you have not already surmised that. And also, I did look up secret social transitions, which is a term now being used to describe teachers transitioning kids with different names and pronouns without parent knowledge. That is a term that is being used these days because we did need to have to label everything these days. So this is a term that is out there now being used.
Thank you very much for your help. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Let's see here. Holloway Testament. Is Holloway Testament here? Okay. How about Gwendolyn Reed Hayes?
Gwendolyn. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Gwendolyn Ricard Hayes. I'm a resident of Epping, New Hampshire, and I'm here today to speak in strong opposition to SB 272. I grew up knowing I was not heterosexual at an early age. This was my deepest held secret for most of my life. I feared retribution from my family. I feared the God I was indoctrinated into believing. Being told by my grandparents that gay people will burn in hell for all of eternity was destructive for my mental health and self-image. Around the time I was in middle school, I was afraid word would get to my guardians and I would be abandoned or forced through conversion torture. The things I heard from my family about gay people gave me reason to be afraid. Unfortunately, my experience is not an uncommon one. My experience is relatively tame compared to how some people have it. In middle and high school, I knew of multiple peers who had unsupportive parents and reactionary guardians. Some of my peers had it better, some had it worse. The far end on the worst side of the spectrum is a frightening place. Violence, abuse, abandonment, and even death at the hands of those meant to protect you. This is a valid and substantive fear that these kids have. Here is a hard truth. Many guardians do not deserve to care for a child. Many guardians abuse the privilege of custody over another human being. Many guardians treat their children no better than property. Children are not property. Guardians do not own them. They deserve the right to privacy and confidentiality, just like the rest of us. School is one of the only places these children can have privacy and confidentiality away from the regime at home. School is one of the only places they can feel safe and be themselves without the crushing weight of worry. SB 272 seeks to undo that. This bill would twist the arm of school employees to notify guardians if their child is found out to be LGBTQ+ or even just perceived as such. If employees refuse, they will face civil penalties. To be perfectly clear, this bill would get kids killed. This bill would get kids abused. This bill would get kids abandoned. These kids' fears are not unfounded. Please vote in expedient to legislate on SB 272 and keep schools a place where LGBT youth can feel safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see what we have now here. Jen Jones from the Office of Child Advocate.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. My name is Jennifer Jones. I'm here representing the Office of the Child Advocate. We are in strong opposition to SB 272. Although the Office of the Child Advocate understands and respects parents' fundamental rights, we have a statutory duty under RSA 21V to protect the rights of children and ensure their best interests are protected. And so I want to bring you to page 4, lines 1 through 3. And you've heard some really rich and salient testimony regarding the ability for children to be safe at school, to feel safe at school. And I want to expand on that a bit and draw your attention to some of my past experience, my past professional experience. And as a child forensic interviewer, interviewing approximately 2,000 children who experienced abuse and or neglect. I can tell you with a reasonable degree of certainty, the children's access to safe adults and to safely disclose to adults is paramount. It is paramount. It is not a testament to the relationship of the parent. And what I can share with you is when I would speak with children and have conversations about what they experienced, I would always ask, who did you tell? Who did you talk to? I can certainly share with you that was very often school staff. Tell me more about that, I would ask. And children would expand on that and give me their reasons. And largely that would sound like, I worried if I told my mom, my perpetrator would hurt her because that's what he told me he would do. I worried if I told my mom, my dad would be made to leave and we wouldn't have our home anymore. I worried if I told my mom, she wouldn't believe me because I already told her and she didn't believe me. And so I offer that because that's the voice of the child. Again, approximately 2,000 children that I interviewed in that capacity. And so what we run the risk of is if teachers are no longer available to our children out of fear of litigation because they don't share information with reference to a child abuse disclosure, we run the risk of completely taking away an element of children's disclosure of sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse. And that element is opportunity. And so So I just wanted to expand on that a little bit in terms of the voice of the child and the conversations that I've had with them. Sorry, I lost my thought there with my 30-second.
You have 10 seconds left.
And so what I do just want to touch on is that doesn't negate the process in which, in the processes that we already have in the state for teachers to disclose that information to the necessary entities. And so our law enforcement agencies, Division for Children, Youth, and Families are very well versed in the timing in which and how they present that information to the parents. And educators are trained on that. Not to
time is up.
over ask. Thank you.
Senator Lang.
First, thank you. As a former child abuse investigator, I very much appreciate that as my time in the police department.
Thank you, sir.
But my question for you is, in this bill, there's a provision for exclusion of data, right? So teachers don't have to, if you turn your mic off, you'll hear me better. So the teacher does not have to disclose if they have a belief that there'll be abuse. And there's a provision within the bill that is in a process. Do you think that process isn't strong enough and that would allow a parent to be able to, you know, in a case where abuse doesn't exist, they would disclose, but in a case where they think there is abuse, they'd have a process for a teacher not to disclose?
Thank you for your kind words and thank you for your question. And so I think that's a great question because it just depends. And so here's where I draw concern or hold concern. Perception is reality. And so we're leaving this up to the educators to decide, you know, and I'll tell you anecdotally, educators already that I've worked with and had conversations with already struggle with how much is over asking or how much is oversharing and who's the right person to tell. And so I think this really throws an added element, and that element is fear, into the mix, right? And so I did my due diligence by reporting, but have I somehow missed the mark? Teachers aren't, and if you're a former law enforcement, you know this, right? A teacher can't call a law enforcement agency and ask for details of an investigation. So we're expecting them to understand where things lie within the course of an investigation, and they can't access that information. I couldn't take a call from a teacher or an educator to say, yes, that child's scheduled for a child forensic interview. And we've informed the parent there's a protective caregiver that we've identified, right? Nor can the Division for Children, Youth, and Families, even if that educator was the one who made the call. So where I hold concern is that there will be such a fear of litigation that teachers may, one, overshare, very unintentionally with no malicious intent, and impede the course of an investigation, and it would erode the integrity of the investigation. You very well know the element of surprise if you've had to do an interview. And so, but also what I would always tell my investigators is the interview doesn't start when the child is in the seat across from me. Everything that happens leading up to and thereafter impacts, right? So if a well-intended educator shared with, let's give a hypothetical, an intact family, mom, dad, child reports abuse about a parent within that household, educator shares with the non-offending parent or the non-alleged, we have no way to know that the non-alleged parent may then give that perpetrator a heads up. And that could look like, hey, I'm angry, what's going on? Or that could look like, I'm aligned with that offender. And so there's all that time, right, before the child's able to really expand on their statement and for the investigators to get a totality of evidence. And what may happen is a recantation. That child may be, maybe given time to reconsider their outcry. And then we lose the ability to really gather all the facts and really understand and have context to what the child may have shared. And so I think your question is a great one. And I think there are processes in place that already support informing parents when the time is right and in a way that makes sense, not only to protect the child, but to protect all the other factors in play. And so I hope I've answered your question, and I'm happy to expand if I have not.
Thank you very much. I'm calling Aubrey Friedman. followed by Kate West. And that pretty much will conclude the hearing on SB 272. Did you? I have lots of people signed up. There is no way we can go through all of them. So if anyone has something that they really want to say, write it, send us an email, send us a letter, and we will read it. There is too many people to be able to hear every single one of them. I mean, I understand it, but it's so much we can do. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Friedman?
Okay, Aubrey Friedman, Bridgewater, private citizen. I speak in support of this bill. I think in some ways it doesn't go far enough. Most of the stuff is already in the law already. The only really controversial parts are about this gender, when the kids change their name and pronoun and all that stuff at school. So under this law, right now, the parents, that school doesn't have to say anything. And we pressed our SAU 4, the administration, about this issue. And they said, we encourage the kids, we're talking about if they want to identify differently and change their name and pronouns and all that stuff at school. We encourage the kids to tell their parents, but we will not tell the parents. I think that's totally, absolutely wrong in that issue, because you're going over the line. And so this bill actually is kind of mild on that issue, because it just says if the parent inquires about it. If the parent doesn't inquire, and they usually wouldn't, nothing's going to happen any different. So that's one issue. The other thing is people are saying, well, our teachers and various people are complaining, you're going to out the kids to their parents. You're being an informant, a snitch. Actually not. It's if the kid just confides to a counselor or a teacher, I'm gay, a bisexual, pansexual, any of these things, or transgender, but they're not requesting to change the records, I want to be called this name and that, whatever, then there's no reason for that teacher to do anything special. The student confided in them, they heard it. There's no reason for them. There's nothing in this bill saying that they have to inform the parents. Now, Section 1W is a little problematic, and I would be okay supporting this bill if they took that out. That's the part about what organizations, extracurricular organizations. I don't think that's such a big deal, to be honest. So if the teachers don't have to tell the parents that, I'm okay with leaving that out. But the part about changing the name at the school, the pronoun and all that stuff, that's too crazy. The parents have to know about that. So I think it's, the bill is good. It's a step in the right direction. It could be a little bit stronger in that direction. The parents should be informed if they want to change the name and all that other stuff at school. But just to be told you're gay or bisexual or whatever, there's nothing in here except for that Section W. I'd be okay taking that out. Section 1W, that could be taken out, and I'd still be okay supporting the bill. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have Kate West? Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Kate West. I am a parent of a child in the Concord School District. I'm also a former school board member. However, I'm speaking in my own capacity today. The sponsor for this bill, I don't remember if I already said I'm in opposition of this bill. The sponsor for this bill said that parents know their children best. Well, if that were true, this legislation would not be necessary. This piece of legislation is obviously a purposeful attempt to make sure that parents can intervene and prolong the inevitable identity of a child that they don't agree with. If you are a loving and supportive, safe parent, then your child will feel safe coming out to you. This law I think one of the things that I've heard is this idea that parents that want to help their kids need to be informed by the school in order to do so. I do think that it is very important that we believe queer and trans kids, and we recognize that the parent that finds out that their child has an identity or is feeling in a way that they feel is unsafe to express at home, that they need to look inward and try to find out why that is and build on that relationship and not put that responsibility on the school. Beyond not agreeing with the content, even if you agree with the content, this is such a vague statement, specifically the warranting the infringement upon parental rights section, that a school board would not be able to create a policy that would clearly identify what kind of evidence is necessary in order to
Thank you.
circumvent this.
You're out of time.
Thank you.
Did you have it written down, a written testimony that we can?
I can email you.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. We can allow a few more people if there's somebody who absolutely wants to speak. Well, I saw one in the back row first. Did you sign in?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your name?
Maggie O'Neill.
Okay, just sit down, start, and 3 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I did drive an hour from Newmarket this morning, so I appreciate the chance to share. I am in opposition of this bill 272. And I strongly urge you to reject this legislation based on the danger it poses to LGBTQ youth. This bill concerns me for several reasons. I spent my school years closeted out of fear. And I'm grateful that I was not outed to my parents by a teacher who discovered my queerness accidentally. I did not voluntarily share it with this teacher. And luckily, she did not out me to my parents. And so I was able to come out to my parents when it was safe for me to do so. And my parents and I have a wonderful and loving relationship currently. More recently, I've worked as a music and theater educator, and I have a master's and a bachelor's degree in education, music education as well. And I have had several students who have come out to me in confidence and who have experienced joy in an accepting environment of choir and theater ensembles without feeling the risk of having themselves be outed in a home atmosphere that can range from potentially just not as welcoming or affirming or unclear to potentially very harmful. And each situation is incredibly different. I've heard a number of people say teachers know everything and parents know nothing, and teachers know nothing and parents know everything. We know the truth is somewhere in the middle, and that every single incident of each child deserves nuance and deserves a team of people to take a look at this. That's something that this bill does not provide for, is nuance. I have 11 years of teaching experience, both in schools and after-school programs. So many kids explore their gender and their queerness in these settings before they confide in their parents, because it's safer to do so. The stakes are lower when you explore in a social setting that is affirming. Your parental relationship is arguably the most important relationship in your life when you're a child. The stakes are very high. So even the fear of being rejected by your parents is looming over these kids.
30 seconds.
They deserve to be trusted to make those decisions of when to come out to their parents according to each individual situation. I urge you to reject this bill. It pathologizes queerness and gender differences. That's what's underlying this bill, and it's a coded attempt to control transgender and queer youth. We should not codify discrimination into the Granite State. We value freedom, and we should not codify discrimination. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's the lady in the red there.
Thank you guys for squeezing me in here. I'm actually speaking in support of this bill. I'm a mom. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I'm also a reporter that's covered extensively both sides of this issue. And I can tell you there's actually organizations.
Just a second. Your name?
Heather Mullins.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so there's actually organizations, some friends of mine that are actually in the LGBTQ community have organizations I strongly encourage you to look into. One of them is called Gays Against Groomers. They actually speak out against pushing this stuff on children because they realize that this is a time where children are really trying to find their identity. I can speak from experience going through high school that like I switched friends, went through different phases, if you will, and eventually you learn to find your identity. So nobody like, or at least for me personally, speaking in opposition to, you know, sort of the indoctrination of children at such a young age, give them time to find their true identity. It's something that if they're truly suffering from gender dysphoria, it will exist once they're 18 and can make that decision for themselves. I will say there's tons of people that are actually speaking out all over the country that did transition. One woman in particular, as a minor, she was given a double mastectomy. She was given hormone blockers. Now she wants to have children and she cannot. This is something that like, there's an assumption that every child that thinks they're suffering from gender dysphoria actually has it. And we want to give the attention to the ones that are truly suffering from that condition or from genetic abnormalities that actually can cause people to be born with multiple reproductive organs. There are real issues that need to be addressed with this, but there's a lot of it that's more of a social contagion. And sometimes when, you know, we talk about who's really the one gaslighting and manipulating these children, I think there are some people that aren't fully aware of the repercussions and how maybe some kids will eventually outgrow it that are actually encouraging children to separate from their parents who genuinely want their best interests. I can say as a mom, I'd be willing to die for my child and nobody cares about her more than me and whatever it is she's dealing with. Like, we don't want our kids suffering from anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts. And a young boy actually took his own life in 8th grade in my daughter's school recently. And I feel like as a community, we all failed him. I don't know what his situation is, but I think when we hear the word affirming, what we need to be affirming these children is that they are perfect just the way they are, and that they don't need to make these drastic changes to their physical body. And if they truly want them later in life, fine, let's support them. But in these adolescent years where there's so much turmoil going on, we need to be affirming children that they are perfect just the way they are and that their parents do love them, because I'd be willing to bet everybody sitting on this panel here, you think you know what's best for your child and that somebody else isn't going to know more than you for them.
30 seconds.
So I just encourage you guys, like, we all want what's best for our children. The majority of parents are good. And I think we need to stand behind parents and not let government come in between a parent and child. And my heart does break hearing for some of these kids that feel like they can't tell their child or their parents, how they feel. But at the end of the day, could the possibility be that the teacher you've trusted is actually the one that you shouldn't be trusting? And perhaps your parents know what's best for you, and that person is trying to come in between you and your parents. So most of your parents love you. Child abuse, we already have laws against that, and I stand against it, but we need to really think critically here, because this impacts our children and we want the best for them. So
thank you. Your time is up. One more. There are 3 of you sitting there.
Good morning. My name is Brianne Wynn. I am currently Miss Greer Dairy, the very first transgender woman to win a Miss America local title. But more importantly, I am a 19-year-old transgender woman who just recently graduated high school, who still has peers who are in grade school, and a success story from an era where this bill was not in place. Even though I say that I am a success story, because I wasn't out as a trans woman, I was outed previously as a homosexual man in middle school. Coming from an immigrant household where the country was extremely conservative, I had extremely tumultuous relations with my parents after I was outed, and took years for me to repair that relationship. But in high school, I was trying to find my identity, and the only reason why I was able to do so was because I was brave enough to ask my teachers, will you out me if I express in a different way? And they told me that they would not. However, my peers did not feel the same way because they feared that the actions would not be equivalent to the words. And I have so many friends who are still in grade school who are petrified of what this bill could do. It could raise anxiety, depression, suicidal ideology, and we all know that those things are not beneficial to our education in grade school, and it could actually lead to them not participating in extracurriculars, them not going to school, and other things. And so I personally believe that I was able to be successful because this bill was not in place, and I urge you to think about children my age and those who are going to be past me, because I do not want to be the last successful person in this community. I want others to have just as easy a time as I did with the resources that I had. Thank you so much, and I urge you to ask any questions about my experience.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
One more, and I'm going to pick, no, not on, we've had several from that side. I have to go to the other side. Lady way up in the corner there. And that is definitely the last one, and after that, we'll close the hearing. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Erin George Kelly, and I'm the Director of Youth and Young Adult Homeless Services for Waypoint. I've come to express my opposition of Senate Bill 272. I've worked with youth and families in New Hampshire for over 20 years and in homeless youth and young adult services in our state for over 15 years. I've seen firsthand that educators and school staff members are often the safest adults in a young person's life, especially youth who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. The legislation that is on the docket today targets these exact people, educators and LGBTQ youth. Parents' rights may seem like common sense, but when you look behind the curtain, these terms are used to strip teenagers of their basic rights to education, physical safety, and freedom, including freedom from sexual violence. The Trevor Project's 2022 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health states that 39% of LGBTQ plus youth in New Hampshire have considered suicide, and 10% of them have at least one suicide attempt in the last year. Forcing LGBTQ plus youth to be outed is not just harmful. It could truly lead to increased suicide attempts and death. This same survey tells us that 44% of LGBTQ plus youth in our state identify home as not being an LGBTQ affirming space. You may assume that establishing a parent's Bill of Rights means connecting loving, caring, and supportive parents with what is occurring within the child's educational setting. But the reality is that the data tells us differently. It will lead to increased neglect and abuse at home or homelessness because of their sexual identity or gender identity. We see this firsthand at Waypoint, as 25% of the youth and young adults who walk through the door of Waypoint's homeless youth and young adult services identify as LGBTQ. That is almost 400 young people each year. New Hampshire's youth deserve better. New Hampshire's public schools need to be a safe space.
30 seconds.
New Hampshire needs to be a state that supports all young people and encourages public schools to be places where people of different races, families, ethnicities, faiths, and gender identities can come together to grow, learn, and thrive. And this bill will no longer allow that to be the case.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That concludes the hearing on SB 272. And again, if you did not have a chance to say your piece, send us an email, letter, whatever. We do read them. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll be back here for an executive session.
That was very good, Ruth. Thank you.
Yes.
she one of the speakers earlier? Alicia? You don't remember? Well, is that Alicia Marion in here? That's done. Haven? Field, child advocate? I know we had one child advocate before. No. Yes, Riley Weiss. Okay, are you Riley Weiss? Okay.
My name is Riley Weiss. Sorry. Thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Riley Weiss, and I am a trans, queer, gender nonconforming person. I go to Milford High School, and I'm here representing the Milford High School's Sexuality and Gender Equality, or SAGE Club. I am a junior in high school, and I should not be here right now. I should be in school studying with my friends, but instead I'm here trying to protect myself and my community. If you enact SB 272, you will be endangering trans students that do not come from accepting families. I know many of these people personally. I have classmates and friends who'd be put in danger if they were forcibly outed by this policy. By allowing for parents to question how their child is presenting at school, you are putting the students in possible and improbable danger. Thank you.
Any questions for Riley? Thank you very much. Senator Lang, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay. An educator, Gigi Keeper. Peyton Durkee. Honorable Butler. Kathy Holmes. Quincy Abramson.
Good morning, members. Oh, well, across to good day, members of the committee. My name is Quincy Abramson, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm a resident of Dover, although I grew up in Concord, just a few blocks from here. I'm here to testify in opposition of SB 272 because of its blatant homophobic and transphobic nature, in addition to being an overall ridiculous attempt to undermine teachers' ability to teach and support their students. I'm queer, and it took me many years to figure that out. I was always passionate about queer and trans rights from a young age, calling out my peers for calling things gay since middle school, and being an active member of GSA, which in my day was the Gay Straight Alliance, now usually Gender and Sexuality Alliance. Because of that, long before I even questioned my identity, there were rumors around school that I was gay, simply because I cared about gay people. If my parents had been notified of my involvement in GSA and the things that students and teachers were saying and assuming about my identity, it would have started conversations I was nowhere near ready for. In general, kids are figuring themselves out, and school is a huge place where that happens. Kids are also fickle. They change their minds and try out different things: gay, straight, cis, trans, whatever. I don't say that to undermine the legitimacy of trans students and children identifying as such. I say that just to give them the space to figure it out. I wanted to be really sure about being queer before talking to anybody about it, especially my parents, even though they are more supportive than some, which I'm really lucky for. But coming out is a big deal for anyone, no matter the situation, and outing students to their parents for even questioning and exploring who they are is harmful. I've heard a lot of parents talk about how they know their children best. Children still know themselves, best, in my opinion. It would have negatively impacted my own mental health and created unnecessary tension and uncertainty in my family. I talked to my parents when I was ready, in college, on my own terms and timeline, and I'm grateful for that. If you have a good relationship with your child, if you are supportive, loving, non-judgmental, you wouldn't need to force teachers to report their every move to you. Additionally, I went to Runlet in Concord for middle school, where I received pretty subpar sex education. So further limiting teachers' ability to educate students about sex will only lead to bad things. I know people who, by the time we were coming back for high school, were pregnant, 14-year-olds. And that happened without their parents opting them out of what little sex education already existed.
30 seconds.
We need to expand sex ed and make sure kids are taught what will keep them safe from abuse, from coercion, from young pregnancy, from STIs, including AIDS, which anybody, gay or straight, cis or trans, can get, not further restrict it because of fear and a misunderstanding of what is even being taught. This isn't about teachers lying to parents. It's just about giving students the place to explore their identities without placing assumptions on that. Teachers support students, not indoctrinate them, period. Teachers support students often even when their parents don't. Don't take that support away.
Time is up.
Thank you.
3 minutes. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Carrie and Pornay? Carrie?
Great. Yeah, Carrie. Anyone named Carrie?
Okay. Grace Murray? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Grace Murray. I'm from Amherst, New Hampshire, and I oppose SB 272. I've lived in New Hampshire my entire life. Despite this, I did not step foot inside a public school until I was a senior in high school. This is because I was homeschooled K through 12. My parents had complete control over my education and extracurricular activities. I can tell you now that this did not benefit anyone involved in my situation. My parents sheltered me and did not give me comprehensive sex ed or access to any books that didn't line up with exactly with their beliefs, among a myriad of other things. Unsurprisingly, though, I ended up learning about all these things they wanted to keep away from me. I just learned about them either by experience, from the internet, or in an unsafe environment, sometimes all three at once. I look at this bill and I believe I see where it's coming from. Parents in general want to protect their children. They want them to grow up smart, well-educated, and steadfast in their beliefs. Most of the time, they also want their kids to grow up believing the same things they do and living by the same set of ethics. My parents also wanted this. Now that I'm older and far removed from my grade school days, I can see that clearly. They cared about me, and that's why they made the choices that they did. However, just because they had good intentions doesn't mean that it worked out. Omitting those things from my education did nothing to stop me from knowing them. It just opened up the door for me to learn those things by myself. If this bill passes, it makes schools a negative, surveillance environment. That's not conducive to children's learning or the teacher's ability to teach. This bill also has the potential to out several kids to their parents, and considering 2/3 of all gay young adults in the United States who come out are not accepted by their families, that puts all of them at risk of harm inflicted by themselves or others. This bill is based on the belief that parents deserve rights. But what is the cost of those? Kids are human beings with their own personalities, thoughts, feelings, and ideas. They deserve to be educated, they deserve privacy, and they deserve rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
How about Maggie O'Neill? Is Maggie O'Neill here? Okay, she's not. David Trumbull? Yes. Is there anybody sitting in here who would like to speak that I have not called on? Yes, third in the row there. Just tell us your name.
My name is Kelsey Mc.
Did you sign in?
I did.
Okay.
My name is Kelsey McNaught. I am from Kentucky, New Hampshire, and I'm here to oppose this bill. Thank you for your time coming back to recess, senators. I appreciate your time here. When I was 15, I was in a public New Hampshire school district. They had an LGBT affirming club at my school district. And a teacher had disclosed this without my consent to my parents. The custody agreement that my parents had with me when I was 15 is that both parties, both my mother and my father, had to be informed of whatever they needed to be informed of at my school. My mother, very affirming and caring, was totally fine that I was part of this LGBTQ club. My father, not so much. When my father was disclosed by this teacher who he was friends with outside of my school district against my consent, he had verbally and physically assaulted me. And it was one of the more horrible experiences of my life. And I feel like if we are having teachers legally have to tell and disclose what their kids need to be disclosed by their parents, you are putting kids in danger. I don't like talking about it, and I'm sad that I have to talk about it here, but I really hope that children who, even if they have one affirming parent in the house and one unaffirming parent in the house, have to deal with this. I just hope that they never have to deal with this again. And I am afraid that this bill, if it is passed, will put more kids in danger. And I really don't want that. As a parent of a transgender kid myself, who had recently came out to me, and I had a lot of questions, as most parents do. But I do wholeheartedly believe that if children are trustworthy of their parents, they have the ability to disclose what they need to disclose to their parents. And that's all the time I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Thank you. What is this thing here? Pamela Sinnott. Sarah Smith. Ryan Aguilina. Keith Howard. Why don't you tell me who wants to speak? I think that would be the easiest. Come up.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Representative Alessandra Rodriguez Murray. I represent Manchester Ward 9. I did not sign in. I can do that after if you'd prefer. I want to preface my testimony by sharing that my relationship with my parents has been mended, and they have made some of the changes necessary to be better parents for my 4 younger siblings. My entire life, I was homeschooled, literally 1 day of preschool and the rest at home. And my parents homeschooled me because they wanted to protect me from the world and indoctrinate me with their own belief systems. Despite their best efforts to keep me ignorant, I slowly learned what being queer meant and came to terms with the fact that I would never be able to be what my parents wanted me to be. My teenage years were extremely traumatizing. I had severe mental health issues that were exacerbated by a toxic and unsupportive home environment. My parents would threaten to send me to a psych ward or make me live in the basement so I wouldn't corrupt my younger siblings. These were the times I used to dream about going to public school. I wanted to connect with other queer teens, or just teens in general, and learn more about myself and the world. I just wanted a place to be myself. It breaks my heart now to see these attacks on these safe spaces for teenagers. Not only are we ensuring these kids can't feel safe to be themselves anywhere, we are also putting an unjust burden on teachers to get involved in family affairs. If parents want to know what's going on with their kids, they should ask them. They should develop trust with them. Forcing teachers to out students will damage their ability to have trusting relationships with adults in the future, and it can put these children in active danger. I know if my parents were told that I was gay when I was a teenager, I would have been kicked out. I would have lost my home, and I would have been one of the homeless teenagers mentioned earlier in testimony. Teachers should not have to determine which kids are out and which homes are abusive. They should let kids figure things out on their own and support the students if the students ask for support. I urge you all to vote today ITL on this legislation and let children be the ones to come out to parents on their own terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Thank you very much. Okay, who else would like to say something that has not been heard? Nobody. We're all finished? And if you still have something else to say, you can still write us, send us an email if you think of something that you haven't said already. Well, thank you very much for coming and for testifying in this extended hearing. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming back.
You're welcome.
Sorry, thank you. I didn't hear what you said. So, Madam Chair, I move we go into executive session for purpose of executing bills.
I'll second. All those in favor of executive session? Aye. Aye.
Want to talk about 218 and 2.
$140?
So, Madam Chair, if I remember right on 140, this was the bill talking about student teaching and creating a stipend program to help people in student teaching programs so that they could better afford to become teachers in that early stage. On its face, it had a $5 million appropriation, so I'm guessing, and this is strictly a guess, that if we were to pass this, that it's going to end up getting tabled. So we can see where it fits in the budget, but I'd be inclined to recommend passage.
I'll second that.
I've made a motion.
So we have a motion of OTP on 140?
Yes, I'll move OTP on 140.
Okay, and you have a second? All those in favor of OTP on 140?
Aye.
That's 5.
And I'll take
Put it on consent?
I'm sorry?
Consent.
I move consent.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, and
You want me to take it out?
Lang wants to take it out.
I'll take it out.
Carrie's gonna take that.
You want to take it out?
Yeah, I'll take it out.
Okay.
I'm being forced to take it out. Just.
Okay, let's run down. 153, First Responder Career Development Recruitment and Retention Program and making appropriation therefore. That was Senator Waters' bill.
Which,
I
sorry,
have a
I
question.
can't hear you, Senator Ward, which bill?
153.
153. List.
What did you say, Senator Prentice?
I'm just trying to find 153. Here it is.
Okay. I have a question here. Public Works employees of the first responders, question mark? And what about the cost of this program?
Well,
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Senator Lang?
So there's at least two amendments that we have on this bill that was submitted by Senator Waters. And it looks like there's a third that's needed based on the last one we got. And I think there's merit to this bill. I'm just not sure we're ready to move ahead with it and knowing the timeline we're on. So I'd make a motion to re-refer.
153. So I have a motion of re-refer on Senate Bill 150.
I'm just going to move over here so I can be seen.
In a second on re-refer.
I think Senator.
I'll withdraw it so she can
I just
comment.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Lang. And I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to a re-refer, but I just do want to point out for the committee that this is one of the recommendations from the Department of Safety's recruitment and retention task force that has to do with first responders, really focusing on fire and emergency medical services. And to Senator Lang's point, there is a fiscal question about this, but if we at least pass the policy side and get it over to the fiscal committee, we can see if some of that can be worked out. If you don't think it's ready for prime time, I won't oppose or, a re-refer, but I think we should pass it and let the finance committee do their job. And we should consider that in the state of New Hampshire right now, we've seen in the last month, 2 ambulance services in particular close their doors. One in your district, Senator Gendro, and one in your district, Senator Lang. And one of them they're both equal in terms of importance, but provides a tremendous amount of inter-facility transfers. And we know what the barriers are to discharge. So patients and that, people need beds. So whatever we can do to help this community, I think we should, at least on a policy side, we should move this to finance and see what happens. That's my consensus. I'm sorry, I'm just fighting over in this corner. I'm like going like this. Because I have short arms, so.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. That's why I moved. Thank you.
So we have one for re-refer and we have one for O2P and send it to fiscal.
So I want to be clear, I'm not opposed to the bill. I just think, I know we already have 2 amendments and I know a third amendment's now needed. So I'm not sure it's ready for prime time. So I want to support it, give us time to correct all the deficiencies in the bill, including the one about how do we deal with highway,
the public,
the highway safety people that are now deemed to be, public works people. And that's not in the bill anywhere either. So that would be another amendment we would need. So I just think re-refer gives us time to give it its chance to correct all the problems with it and come out with a good, clean bill.
go ahead, Carrie. Senator Gendro, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, but if you had.
No, I said that I wouldn't be opposed to re-refer, but I wanted to make my pitch on why, I think there's 2 ways we can go with this. I've said the way that I want to go with it, but I will, I respect the not ready for prime time. And I do believe that this bill, the question about public works needs to be sorted out, but it was, because I worked with Senator Waters early on this, it was really for fire and emergency medical services.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And is Senator Waters okay? Do we know where he stands on this?
So which one do we go, re-refer or O2P?
Yeah, re-refer. Senator Lang made the motion.
I'll make the motion to
Second
re-refer.
the motion, or did you? Senator General, did you already second it? Not get in your way? Sorry.
You can go for it.
Okay.
Do we refer? All those in favor of re-refer?
Aye.
We put that on consent?
All set?
I'll talk to Senator Waters.
5-0. And who wants to take it up? Francis will take it up.
Yep.
Who's gonna take it out?
Senator Francis.
I'll take it up. Thank you, Carrie. Senator General.
Yeah.
So we need to make a motion. Motion to go on consent?
Second.
Which one was that? Which one are you talking about?
The same bill.
Oh, the same, yeah, consent, right.
Next up is 213.
I don't have it. I have 213. Oh, there is the bill. Okay.
213.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Bill, social media platform.
So 213 is a social media bill by Senator Waters. He did share an amendment with us. We could adopt as a committee amendment, and I think you all have it. It's been delivered, and it adds a new paragraph 5 that just creates an opt-in program for students in career technical education programs and that kind of thing. And I'd support an OTP as amended with this amendment, section 5.
I second that amendment. Well, first of all, we gotta go through the motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I said I support, I didn't make the motion, I just
I
want to
didn't
see
know
where
where
everybody
it
else
was.
is.
Sorry. I know where I am. I just didn't know in the process.
So that's the amendment 0788S.
Oh, do we actually have the amendment?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I didn't have it.
So can I make a motion on the underlying bill on 213 out of pass?
Of the amendment?
The underlying bill. Do we have a motion on that?
Do the amendments first.
Amendment first, and then move the bill as amended. So, what's the amendment number?
0788,
Okay. Need a motion on 213.
So I'll make a motion out of pass on Senate Bill 213.
Down a second.
I'll second.
Now we take up the
Now
amendment.
we'll take up the amendment. All right.
Okay, the amendment to the bill on 213, amendment number 788S.
I'll make a motion to
Accept the
accept the
amendment.
amendment 70788S.
I'll second. Go ahead, you got it.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we go back to the underlying bill. Accept voted positive on the underlying bill 213 with the amendment. It's had an O2P before, so all those in favor are O2P with the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in favor is 5-0. Consent,
Move consent.
second by Fenton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Who wants to take it out? You want to take it out, Donna?
Oh, she's on.
You raised your hand.
Fenton will
I'll
take
get
it out.
it.
Yeah.
I'll go back.
216.
Madam Chair, 216 had two amendments to it. You had an amendment which we actually already adopted.
Yep.
And then I had an amendment that we held and we sent to Senator Khan for referral. I had a conversation with Senator Khan. They were okay with my amendment. And so in front of us is an amendment number 679S, which is a combination of your amendment and my amendment combined into one committee amendment.
Yeah, I spoke with Senator Khan and he's checked with his civics group and he says they're all fine with it, so.
So
So I move OTP on 216.
second on OTP on 216.
And then I'd move amendment number 679S.
679. Not 670. Oh, here's 679, okay.
I'm going to second that and then I just.
That was the committee amendment, I believe.
I'm sorry?
That was a committee amendment.
That's committee amendment.
So we have an OTP on 216. And we
And
have the
motion to amend.
amendments, the committee amendment, which is already in there, and then we have Senator Lang's amendment, which has been accepted by the originator of the bill. Yes,
We have a second yet. You made
You seconded it
did on the amendment?
on the amendment.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure which amendment, because you said they both come together. So are we doing,
So 679S
79 is the one
is the merger of
both of them?
both amendments, Senator Ward's amendment from last week, and then my amendment that we held, and we merged into one.
All right, so this one I'm going to set aside because it is now in this one. Okay, thank you. All set.
all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0.
Move consent.
Now we can go to the underlying bill and get that done. Move to consent.
I'm sorry, did we vote on the underlying bill?
Oh, jeez.
No.
Had to find it
We
here.
had no shakes. So,
So withdraw your.
so
The underlying bill with the amendments is 5-0. And you want to have consent?
he says we haven't voted on it yet. We only voted on the amendment.
OTP.
So there's a motion of OTP on the amendment, on the underlying bill, which we didn't vote on, because then we amended the bill, and we voted on the amendment, and now we need to vote on the bill as amended.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Consent.
Getting into a rhythm here.
I move consent.
Second.
That's 5-0 for consent. You want to take it out, Tim?
I'll take that.
Okay. Lang will take it out.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I haven't heard Senator Fenton take out any bills in a while.
I just took one in.
All right, it's checking.
Okay, now we have 217.
217 and 218. It should be made like a book.
I have an amendment. Do you have my amendment to that?
Yep, got your amendment.
Do you have the amendment?
No, 217.
Yeah.
0595S.
Yeah.
Anybody wants the amendment? You have it?
Which amendment?
Which bill?
595S on
Yeah, but
bill.
217 is the
Thank you.
bill.
All right, let me make sure. 217. I would say the Antwerp. Thank you. I don't have one here at the sticky note. Okay, so.
Madam Chair, the question I had on this bill is, I believe there's still a study committee going on this teacher incentives and teacher shortage. And my question is around that conversation on whether we should move forward with a bill, knowing that we haven't seen the study committee's report yet.
Well, this is the bill that, yeah, right. Well, the study committee is still going. Actually, it's being reopened this coming Friday. And this part here addresses the salaries of teachers. I have a feeling from what I have read and seen that a lot of other issues having to do with teacher shortage besides just the salary. And I think we need to finish up the study committee. Are you on that study committee? So I'll see you Friday. So
So I will say, I think Senator Lang and I have had this conversation about kind of like shooting a shotgun and seeing what sticks. But we haven't chosen anything that sticks. That's the problem. And we're at a precipice now with teachers and the shortage that we got to start moving now. And this directly came out of that study committee. You know, this is what we learned is an issue, is repayment of loans, and rural and underserved locations need help with teachers. We saw HB1 and HB2 come out, and there's nothing for repayment of educator loans. It deals with a lot of in-demand jobs. Well, teaching is an in-demand job. We need teachers. And I think this is a huge step in the right direction because we've done nothing so far. And if it's the fiscal note that we're scared of, let's pop it over to finance. Let's get it passed and we can get into the budget if possible.
The thing that I have is, I think I'm right in saying that in the governor's budget, there will be a section on incentives for not just teachers, but for other professions who are in, that we really need, with incentives and perhaps by, paying off some of the loans at the same time. So I'm just wondering if this is sort of on the early side before we really know what is in the governor's budget. There may be something there that will address this and address other professions as well, whereas this is just for the teachers.
I haven't seen anything from the governor's office that indicates repayment of teacher loans. That's what makes me nervous. I'm not saying he's not going to do it. You probably have a more direct line to him than I do.
I just read the stuff.
I think we have to do something for our educators. I think we have to provide assistance. I think, as I stated earlier, it's only getting worse, and we're getting to a point of no return almost, where if we don't start attracting teachers to the state, they're going to go to Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine, all our bordering states. What incentive do they have to stay here and teach in New Hampshire? And this is a huge incentive. I think it's desperately needed.
Yeah. It is an incentive, but I've also seen that there are other things happening for the teachers to stay in New Hampshire. Something that's coming up for people who commit themselves to staying and teaching in New Hampshire versus going somewhere else. May very well be, I don't know this, but it may very well be that you have a better chance of having an incentive payment if you promise that you will stay in New Hampshire for a certain length of time. So I'm just saying that I feel this is a little early. It's a good thing, and I think we need to take a look at the salary of teachers. We also need to take a look at the salary of an awful lot of other people. We desperately need nurses and mental health counselors. Personally, I would like to see, this was a temporary observation after three months of the study committee. And because the previous chair did not choose to run again, we have not had any kind of meetings, and we're now meeting again on Friday where we're going to reconstitute and take a look at the rest of the stuff that goes into not only just teacher recruitment and retention, but also other professionals, not just having one, having those different groups of professionals being put together and providing something for all of them. My feeling is I would like, as much as I like to see the salary go up, I think we can probably wait another year, re-refer this one and have a time for the study committee to look at all the other things that can influence whether or not teachers are staying here. That's my thought. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. So this is Senate Education. I hear what you're saying about other professions, but here I just want, I think we need to focus in on teachers. I have never in my lifetime, especially living in New Hampshire, which I have not lived in New Hampshire my entire life, I wish I had, have seen signs out in front of schools in my district and in other people's districts that say, teachers needed, substitutes needed. Like there's never been more of a need. I think we have to take every opportunity to move the needle on this, or we're going to be further behind than we already are. So I respect what you have to say about all professions, but we don't know what other things might be out there at this point. But we know what we have in front of us is one of the solutions. And having lived, especially in one of the more rural parts of the state, I can appreciate an effort like this to focus on that area. So I think there's no time like now that we should pass this, and we should let the finance committee work it out. And if there's a place, as we've seen this procedurally, where other bills come together and it becomes one package, that's fine with me, but I want to focus on education right now, teachers right now. I know that committee's not done with its work, but it's even shocking to me that we have to have a committee to study the shortage of teachers in a great state like this. Like, we've come to that place, so I just believe we need to move on this. So I'll make a motion to pass.
Okay, so we have a second for all to pass? Second by Senator Patton. All those in favor of all to pass? Yes, Senator Lang.
Thank you. So while I appreciate, I know we want to move forward, I'm concerned that we implement something. I'd rather, like the Senator Board said, I'd rather re-refer this and use this as a vehicle to implement all the changes coming out of the study committee and have a vehicle to do that, so we don't have, again, the shotgun approach of different bills. So I guess I'd prefer re-refer, wait for the committee to give out the report that says, here's our findings, and then use this bill as a vehicle to implement those findings.
This isn't even my bill, but I'm going to speak up. Senator Lang, I appreciate what you have to say, but if we wait, how much further do we get behind? Like, I don't see the harm in moving forward. So we can, we've got an OTP, we can vote it up or vote it down. I'm going to vote to pass this, but that is my, we have to take these opportunities, and I don't feel like I'm, being any less of a good steward of the finances of the state of New Hampshire in, trying to move forward a bill that will actually, focus on our teachers, focus on our schools, especially in the more rural areas of the state. Okay, I'm done. I love to hear myself, but I'm going to let it go.
And I agree with Senator Lang. You and I have talked about this bill, and you're, to re-refer it. But I think, again, talking about that study committee, we're going to come up with the same problems that we're having. And this bill came out of that study committee and addresses the problem that we found there. And, by re-referring it, I think we're just going to see the same issue in the study committee. And like Senator Prentice says, let finance deal with it, and we can go from there. If the governor comes out with a rural and underserved educator incentive program, heck yeah, that'd be fantastic.
The only other thing I'd say, I ask for a map to see what portion of the state, what percentage of the state falls under this classification. I get to see it.
Isn't this the?
Sorry?
I have this in here, and even though it's public health at work, it signifies what is considered, this comes from DHHS, goes by the definition of rural.
Right, that's a public health.
Yeah, but they use the definition of rural, so there are federal definitions of rural, and that's for the public health networks. This is, the one that they use, and I can't imagine that it's going to be much different.
Okay, so I have an auto pass. Senator Prentice and Senator Patton. All those in favor?
Aye.
So that's all those opposed?
No. No.
So that's
Not trying to re-refer.
auto pass 2 to 3. Re-refer?
Yes. Second.
I vote for re-refer. All those in favor of re-refer?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
You want
Yes,
to
aye.
re-refer? Prentice?
Yes.
Okay. Re-refer is 5-0.
Move consent.
Put this on consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
This sure is too. Sorry. Yeah, aye.
Do you want to take it out?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Fenton will take it out. I'm sorry, Senator Fenton will take it out. And there's this one here. Because we have the Early Childhood Development Grant on 2/18. That has to do with bill support for new teachers. This is your bill.
It is.
No?
Same, I hate to beat a dead horse, but it's the same issues we're up against in the study committee. We need help with educators, and we need help with teachers. And this bill would directly support our educators in the school. And I think it's a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, this is just to help to mentor new teachers and
Correct. It came out of, we lose teachers very fast when they enter a new school. Sometimes it only lasts a year or so, and this bill would help them in their career in education within the first 3 years, because we know that is when the biggest turnover is. And our job is to try and support schools and keep educators as long as possible, make them feel comfortable for as long as possible, and really working with that new school district to support those educators.
do you know why they leave so early?
I would assume other states either offer more money or they are having issues adapting to the climate. Maybe it's a rural area. They come from a metro area. It could be a plethora of issues.
Okay, so it's emotional support, perhaps social support?
I think it's more than that. I think it's professional support.
Okay. Okay, do I have a vote on this? I have a motion.
As long.
Okay, Senator Lang.
I am a little nervous about this bill. On its face, I agree with it, but I'm a little nervous when we're talking about professional development, farms, professional development. That is a collective bargaining agreement issue. I know because I negotiate 2 teacher contracts and professional development was part of the conversation about making sure teachers were included in what the professional development program was. So I'm a little nervous. We might be tipping our toe into a CBA issue, but I just want to and just understand that we may have an issue with it being deemed as someone complaining about the fact that we're stepping into a collective bargaining issue.
Should we take that chance?
What's that?
Should we take that chance?
That's the question. Do we
Well,
take that chance?
I know this is do we want to ask a union, the National Education Association? I mean, we have union representatives in the room. They're going to be able to, luckily they're here and they can answer this question, because I want to support this. I don't to try to get in the middle of local business, but I think this is a really good idea. Another really good idea at a time, once again, when it's all hands on deck.
Okay, do we have a vote, do we have a motion on the bill?
I move to pass.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3,
Aye.
4, 5.
Move consent?
Sure.
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
Jandro, do you want to take it out?
Sure.
Senator Jandro will take it out.
There's a dog here.
Okay. Now we have the final one. SB 272. Should be all fresh in your memory. Well, there's no question, something needs to be done with this kind of topic. I have been reading all kinds of stuff on the computer and the papers, and this is the trend throughout the states of going to figure out that parents need to have a voice in what's happening in the schools, and there shouldn't be that adversary feeling between the schools and the parents. The parents have a right. The children really don't belong to anyone, but the parents certainly have the major responsibility and should be able to work with the schools and with the staff to find out questions. And the schools have an obligation, the staff has an obligation to answer their questions honestly. So despite all the problems, and I know everybody was mentioning the LGBTQ, that seemed to be the overriding thing. I just don't see that in the bill. The bill covers so many other things. So I'll vote to pass on this one here.
Can we have some other discussion on it, or? Yeah.
We can certainly have discussion on it, yes.
Sorry, I was putting up, well, I was stretching and putting my hand up. Okay, Senator Ward, you know, I have, so I'm going to tell you why I'm opposed to this. And if we could consider amending it, we might have something that I would be willing to work with. Look, I'm a parent. My 26-year-old doesn't, live at home anymore. We had a good, she's grown up and moved out and is living in another state working. So I respect the rights of parents, and none of my comments are contrary to that. But when I went through this, and all my blue marks are about the things that we're just affirming what we already have and do in statute, okay? But then there is this section, okay, that is carved out, that is, in my opinion, is discriminatory and targeted. So if we want to reaffirm all of these other areas, I'm not, and I don't even think that's necessary, honestly, but want to throw that that's one thing. But if we want to carve out a certain group of kids and say, if they are identifying, with a certain, they are identifying with a different gender, they are exploring their gender identity, then something has to happen where to me, it's like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what's already in law. And it says, according to this statute, according to this statute, according to this statute, and then boom, by the way, if there's a child that is, that is again exploring their gender identity and you are aware of it, then you have to tell the teacher. So why is that even in here? I mean, what is this really?
What is the section you're referring to? Just so I can follow you.
T through W.
Yeah, T, U, V, and W.
What page?
4.
Page 4.
Page 4, okay. So that's the section that Senator Carson was talking about. It's different from the earlier bill.
Okay, that's what I'm going to say.
Can I share some comments? Madam Chair? The, first of all, I guess some questions I had down were, how did we even get to this point? And it just kind of grieves me, and it with a heavy heart hearing some of the testimonies. How did we get to this point? So when did parents lose the ability to be a part of their children? In the paper this morning, one of the local papers, it's actually Associated Press, education writer, the headline is, "Many kids are struggling in school, but parents don't always know." So I think this is a bigger issue than, and unfortunately, sometimes in fighting, we can't fight the smoke, we got to fight the fire. But what is the fire? And I mean, there's a lot of things where I'm coming from as a parent. I mean, I know I used to tell people that I was had a drug problem when I was a young person. I was drugged to church all the time. So I think sometimes getting back to those basic, foundational, what are the moral issues that kids are dealing with today? I think another big issue is trust. It seemed to come up a lot. Well, I didn't dare to go to my parents. I didn't dare, I didn't want my teachers outing me. Where did the trust go? So those are it was heavy on my heart. So I just wanted to share. And, I make no, I'm not embarrassed to say I am a believer in that I wholeheartedly believe what God's word says. In Psalm 139, he says, I knit you together in your mother's womb. And he also says he created male and female. That's it. There's no other genders. So he also says in his word that he knows us before the foundations of the earth was even formed. That's where I'm coming from. And that's why it grieves me when we're dealing with issues like this.
Senator Prentice?
So if others haven't spoken, I want to give them the opportunity, and then else.
I would agree with Senator Gendro at how did we get to this point? Why do we have a bill that signals out one group of children? That's what I don't understand. We're treating this group, this LGBTQ group, very different than other individuals when it comes to their gender identity or what pronouns they use. And that just doesn't make sense to me when we have so many other issues happening in our education system, and we decided that this is what concerns parents. If a child doesn't feel comfortable to tell their parents about their gender identity, what makes us think that the teacher would do a better job telling that parent or similar, or outing them, as we're saying? And I just don't believe that this bill is necessary or where it even came from in the beginning. You know, we talk about we're the live free or die state, and we're not really exemplifying that right now.
See, I'm surprised because I'm looking at this bill as the parents having a right to go and ask questions, what's going on, what the curriculum looks like, what they're being taught, what books they're using. That's how I look at it. I don't look upon this thing as being to get a certain group of kids who happen to be wondering about their sexuality. To me, this bill is parents have a right to know what's going on in the school, and they have a right to ask, what are the grades of my kids? What are the books they're reading? How are they behaving? And for some reason, this thing has just been totally concentrated on the LGBTQ community. And I don't look at the bill as that. I really don't. So it really surprises me that that was the emphasis on most of the testimony. Yes.
May I thank you, Senator Ward. So, Senator Gendro, I'm with you on where did this all, like, what are we doing here? Like, where did this all come from? And although I missed some of the earlier part of the testimony where maybe folks who had, I heard, who had concerns and, about how this or why this came about, I'm just not 100% clear factually on that. And it is I want to speak to a couple things, but I'm going to say this just while it's hot on my mind. Senator Ward, the reason that we're talking about about the LGBTQ and trans community is because a section of this speaks. It names it. It says, it talks about gender identity, and that is where that community who feels that they're not being protected or protected by us is coming to us and saying, this is not the way to go about this. So I hear what you're saying. I just that's my perspective. The other thing is that when my daughter was in school, there were parent-teacher conferences. If I was concerned that something was going on, and, especially when she was a senior and she wasn't doing her math homework, it was a junior. Let me tell you, I went in there all of the time. I had weekly, for a while it was weekly meetings until we got her math skills where they needed to be. She probably would be cringing if she heard me talking about this. However, if there is objectionable material, it's listed, it says, again, there's a whole list of things that are already in law that are in here. And then there's this section about gender identity. I got an email last night, and you probably all got it too, that talked about two families, one from Hanover and one from Etna, that are in my district. These parents are saying, we didn't know that our children were being taught this in their classroom. And it was like sexual abuse related education, like how to identify if you're, if you're in danger. And, I go back to something we talked about. I happen to have this already printed up because it was in a hearing a few weeks ago that, there was a bill in, House Bill 103, I think it was in 2017, that said, that if there's any material, the instruction of human sexuality or human sexual education, you actually have to give notice. This is already in law. They have to give notice to the families, and the families can pull their children from them. So I read that, and I appreciated, it came through someone else to me. They didn't come directly to me, but I appreciated their perspective, and I thought, okay, was this not actually followed? I don't really know, but there is a way for, if there's objectionable material, is sexual nature, and families want to pull their kids, they can. If they want to look at curriculum, they can. We follow the immunization rules. There are required immunizations that the Department of Health puts in place, but if there's a religious or a medical exemption, those are already, that's already in statute. I've just worked my way through these, and I'm like, well, again, I think we could give this as a list to parents or to the schools and say, let's just make sure that everybody's clear on this day one. But what is different is this one particular section, and that's why we heard testimony on that, not these other pieces, because it's already law, because you already have access, because you can already talk to the schools. When my daughter was struggling, I knew. I talked to the schools, and they didn't try to hide anything from me. All right. Again, I know I like to talk. I'm done for now. Okay, thank you.
Senator Lang?
Thank you. So one of the reasons we're in this discussion is because of school board policy JBAB, right? That's what kicked this whole thing off, was as schools are trying to deal with this idea of dealing with transgender students, how do they deal with it? And the problem was specifically in the policy, it told teachers to lie. It told teachers to lie to parents, and that while you may call the transgender person by a different name in school, don't use that name with the parents. Use the proper pronoun, the legal name with the parents, so as to not to out the child. So you're putting the policy itself put teachers into a conflict of how they deal with that. If they're being truthful and honest, they're going to call them by what they call them in school. And so I think the reason we're sitting here is because there was an explicit school policy that told teachers to lie. To parents. And so therefore now we're doing an explicit law that says, no, don't lie to parents. And that's one of the reasons why we're sitting here. As I look, through this bill, and as you said, Senator Prentice, a majority of this bill is reaffirming what's already in statute, putting it into one place so parents can look at it, understand what their rights are, because it's spread out all through different parts of our law and everywhere. But when the other question came up, and I alluded to it in my questions to people, was I'm concerned about the suicidal rate of this group. And if you're asking why it's in policy, is because we know that the rate is higher, and that if parents don't know about what's going on, those students are at greater risk. And so I look this to Senator Ward's point. I look this as a positive health item for people of transgender nature, because it lets when a parent, as a parent of 4 kids, I went through those teenage years. And sometimes my kids didn't want to talk to me, and sometimes they did. That's the nature of being, we talk about all the time about daughters and mothers going through that period of time, right? You just don't want to have, the kids don't want to talk to you. They're with their friends, they're doing their things. And those conversations are really tough to have, because the kids are just in that age. They're truculent. They don't want to deal with it. So I'm more concerned about, like I said in the testimony, a parent who observes behavior, is unclear what it is, can't get an answer out of their kid, and so goes to the next trusted parent, next trusted adult in the individual, and says to a teacher, do you got any idea of what's going on here? And the teacher doesn't disclose. And I think that puts the child at risk at home for those suicidal things, where you're creating a direct division with, this is how I act in school and this is how I act at home. And the teachers are encouraging that by not informing that differentiation. And I'm concerned that parents, again, I believe that the vast majority of parents are good parents, are looking to help their child, whatever they're going through. And that this allows the parent to be able to be supportive and say, no, it's okay. You don't have to have these 2 identities, because that's really what we're asking our kids to do, have 2 identities, one in school and one at home, one with your friends, one with your family. And I don't think that's the best thing in the world. I think that only increases the child's risk for suicide.
I agree with you.
What's it?
I agree with that.
And so, and the last thing I'm concerned about is liability. If the school knows that a child is struggling with an issue, and whether you call it a mental health issue through gender dysphoria or something else, but the school knows the child's going through it and does not disclose it to the parent, and something happens to that child, they commit suicide, they become a statistic. What is the liability of the school district who lied to the parent, knew there was a mental health issue, and did nothing to help give the parent that information?
I know.
Well, I don't think it needs to be an affirmative. In other words, as soon as the kid says, the teacher has to run and tell the parent. This is talking about parents who care and are going to the school and asking, I see something going on, I'm not sure what it is. Mm-hmm. And for the parents for the school to turn around and have no response, and let the parent try to deal with that truculent child when they know, I'm concerned that the school is now incurring liability on a wrongful death case because they knew that this population has a higher suicidal rate and they didn't tell the parents what was going on. And I think the school district would potentially have a wrongful death liability in there that I don't want to see our schools have.
We have to be out of here because the judiciary is coming in. And 3 of us have to go to another committee.
Yeah, and certainly I appreciate all you had to say, but I think what I know that we heard today is that these children and even parents came in and talked about this in the opposite frame. That yes, this is a population that is more at risk, but by the fact that, for whatever reason, they are not comfortable at home. They don't feel safe at home. They can't talk about this at home. And they have that trusted adult in the school and they go to them. I don't want to stop that. The lying part, I hear you, okay? But why are we getting in the middle of this? I think we're more at risk if we shut down every avenue for these children and say, you just can't talk to anybody. And then where are we going to be then? So, I respect the comments you made. I wanted to offer the counter because that's what the children, the teens, and some of the parents in particular, that's the way that they talked about it.
I want to echo that as well. It's turning into almost a don't ask, don't tell situation. And I agree with you said that, I want to know what's going on with my children in school, how they're doing in school, how their grades. But the flip side of that could be turned around and that, we might be creating a worse situation by that teacher outing that student. And these teachers have no training in something like this. And what I learned from a pediatrician was that if their patient told them that they were gay or transgender, their next questions were, okay, how come you haven't told your parents? Do you feel safe at home? Those are the conversations they're having, and there's none of that language in this. It's just the parent asks, yes.
I'm sorry,
Okay, we have a choice.
I just want to correct that statement, because there is a provision within the bill that allows the teacher not to tell if they can articulate a safety issue. So there are provisions where if there's a known issue, teachers can not tell a parent as long as they notify the administration. I'm not telling them, and this is why.
If there's a known issue already.
So I'm just saying but that would be the only reason why you shouldn't tell, right? So.
Okay, we have to either take a vote, because we've got to get out of here, and 3 of us have to be somewhere else at once.
Okay. Although this bill is not perfect, I would make a motion ought to pass.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass on 272. Who's ought to pass? I'll vote ought to pass. And you 2 are no, so that's 3 to 2. Okay. Thank you. We are finished, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on the floor.
Who's taking that out?
I'll take it out. Okay, well, thank you very much. Now you don't have to go to 101 at 2 o'clock. When you finish your next sentence, you say, you can go home. Executive session, I need to move out.
Oh, we got to move out of the executive session.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're done.
Good job, Bruce. Good job. Why?
That?